Okay, we're going live. We're live on YouTube. Okay, everyone, shh. We're live on YouTube and we're getting started today with our flow state yoga. This workshop is going to be really fun because I have my epic friend, Ray Indigo, here with us today. And one of the things that we're going to be really talking about today is really like Yoga 101 in a way, like the fundamentals of yoga and how you can utilize this practice not only to benefit your health, of course, but for so many other benefits for your spiritual progress and evolution, as well as to serve the world and discover your life purpose and so much more. We're going to be talking about the 8 limbs of yoga, which is the foundation of the yogic path, thousands of years old. And we'll be taking questions and answers, or we'll be taking questions, we'll be offering some answers, hopefully, or at least asking you questions to get the answers from yourself. And so please feel free to post anything you want in the chat, in the comments, any questions, and we'll be answering those sporadically throughout. So I'll just introduce Ray. Ray is a dear friend of mine. I've known her for many years, and what a blessing. You know, one of the things that I learned over the course of my life as a teacher is that it really is a lot more fun when you have other people to collaborate with and to connect with along your path. And so that's what community is really all about. And there's different ways that you can connect to community. But as a teacher or as a student, there is something that deepens, I feel, when you find other people that are on the same path and that have a similar understanding of existence, the universe, our purpose for being here, and all of that. So that's what I found with Ray, and she's one of my dear, dear friends and allies in this.
Smell good. She smells good. You want that home.
Yeah. So yeah, Ray actually has her own school. She has, your school is called Universal Yoga?
No, it's World Yoga.
Okay.
World Yoga Institute.
World Yoga Institute. And so she does her own training. Right now she's here offering her magic to our group in Costa Rica, and we've been having such a blessed experience with your teaching. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So exciting. So this portion of our training, actually we do every week on Sunday. We have our live workshops, and it's 3 hours. So, you know, we also offer the replay if you have to leave in the middle, but I encourage you to stay the whole time because it's really fun. And we will be doing some practices as well, perhaps a guided meditation and some different things that'll be really enhancing for the experience. And we'll also have a break midway through. So please do mute yourself so that if you have background noise happening, it'll be really beneficial for all of us to be able to still hear. And then if you want to speak, you can raise your hand in the chat, or you can post a comment, and then we can ask, invite you to unmute, and then we can listen to your questions like that. Okay? So let's get started.
Let's begin. So Dasha, what are the 8 limbs?
Okay, so the 8 limbs, which is traditionally called, the word is Ashtanga. So in Sanskrit, the actual word for 8 is Ashta. So that's why they have this word Ashtanga, which is the 8 limbs, because the ga, that's the limb, right? So that's really what the foundation of the yogic path is based on. And it starts with the more physical world, and it goes all the way to the highest attainment of the yogic practice, which would be samadhi, which is also in many ways kind of similar to what is known to be enlightenment, or at least the experience of the infinite existence, the source of life. And that's what I also call flow state. So when you're connected to in the Taoist tradition, they call it the Tao. But when you're connected to this everythingness, which is also nothingness, then that's really when you're living your best life, because you're aligned with the universe and everything is going well. Doesn't mean that this is happening all the time, by the way. But if you can connect to the flow, if you can find your way back, if you're in the middle of a storm, which so often in life we find ourselves there, then these practices help us to clear out the blocks to the flow so we can get back on the river and enjoy the journey down the stream.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. So just for everyone who is, let's scoot this back a little bit. For everyone who is here in the live stream, you'll see me looking here. We have a full table of students, just so I'm going to speak to them and then check on you guys, just so that you understand where my eyes might be going. Excellent. All right, so the 8 limbs. This is the 8 limbs is from Raja Yoga. And yesterday I talked about not yesterday, 2 days ago, the 4 paths of yoga. And if you remember, the 4 paths are Jhana, the yoga of knowledge, Raja, which means royal path, Bhakti, which is the yoga of devotion, and Karma, which is yoga of action. Now, they're not really separate. They work together, yeah? But oftentimes someone will feel a calling towards one of these paths or the other. So for instance, someone who has a lot of strong emotions, they might decide to work with Bhakti Yoga, which works heavily with the emotions, specifically bringing beauty and blessing and devotion to everything around you. Bhakti Yoga has different forms. There's the Krishna ones, which are very strong religious form, but then there's also the Kirtaniyas and different chanting sects of yoga. And what you'll see a lot with Bhakti Yoga is they spend a lot of time chanting the name of God in different ways and with beautiful music. Making sense? What would you add about Bhakti?
Well, when I started on yoga and I discovered the path of Bhakti, it really resonated with me because I had always been seeking like a life purpose. And I feel like Bhakti Yoga helps people to understand the purpose of life better because you start to see your interconnectedness with everything and that your role here is to serve in some way. And that's what Bhakti is. It's devotion to the spirit, but at the same time, through that devotion, you find a path to serve. And so I find everybody should in some way connect to Bhakti, even if it's not your full calling in the yogic path.
Yeah, it's one that you should know about. So then next, let's talk about Jhana Yoga, and that's spelled Jnana. And I may not be pronouncing it perfectly because I'm American and my Sanskrit is so do better than me. And what Jhana Yoga is the study of scripture or knowledge-based yoga. So it's the reading of a lot of sacred texts. Now, this is an excellent endeavor because it directs your attention towards the divine and to your own understanding of it. And the way that you're supposed to do Jhana Yoga is not to read something and memorize it, but it's to read something and say, okay, how does this mean for me to allow yourself to move into the teaching from yourself outward? In other words, eat it and then emit it. Yeah. And so when we get into the 8 limbs, I'll talk about something called Svadhyaya. That's Svadyaya. And this means it's a part of Jhana Yoga, which means self-study. So reading sacred texts and self-study, and also to sit and work with this. And there's a certain part of our life we want to devote to that. Making sense? What would you add about Jhana Yoga?
That's a good, very good description. I would say one of the things that's interesting is that there's only very few people in the world that can just know everything without reading a book. And so if you're not one of those people that can just know everything without reading a book, that Jnana Yoga is very important for everybody's path because that's where you're going to learn about the knowledge, the wisdom, the history, the philosophies of the ancient masters. And then from their experience that they share through books and through the ancient texts, and like what she was saying, not just the reading of it, but the application and the meditation and the contemplation on what they have shared is how you're going to deepen your understanding of existence. And I found that a lot of yogis, they just do the physical practice, but they don't actually embody yoga. And the embodiment of yoga is to understand what it's really all about and then work very hard in whichever way necessary to align yourself with the truth. And so often, people are just kind of like, oh, I do yoga, and then that's like an exercise program. But the true yoga is that experience that we have when we're living in alignment with truth. And that's what a lot of the texts, I think a lot of the ancient texts are teaching.
Yep. So Jhana Yoga is excellent. And some people only will do that. And the thing that happens if you only are a Jhana yogi is a very interesting thing. So each one of the 4 paths needs to work together. If they're in isolation, they all have a shortcoming. So, and we want to understand that. So the shortcoming that can be of Jhana Yoga is that because you use so much logic and reason, you end up seeing that there's no point or purpose to life. And so the heart becomes closed in a way because you're like, if everything is everything, why does anything I do matter? And so this is why we need some of the other yogas so that the life is balanced. Does that make sense?
That's so true.
Yeah. And with Bhakti Yoga, the thing can be avoiding, like they become so devoted that they avoid having their own life. They actually will neglect their own life because they enter so deeply into devotion, which can or cannot be a problem. but we just want to see that that's one of the things that can happen. I think that's not such a bad problem, but you can see that you become so into God that you lose the ability to know how to manage the world.
Yeah, and how to even, have any interest in having a job or, taking care of things in the material world. So that's definitely one of the risks. It's important to balance all of these paths, like you mentioned, because I've seen people in each one and they're just full in that one path. And it's important, I think, for some people to go down that route just to learn that that's not the way to go. If you have an imbalance in your life and if you're a yogi and you're depressed because you don't feel like there's a purpose to life, then there's a path that's missing for you, or a part of the big picture that's missing, perhaps.
Excellent. So next, karma yoga. Karma yoga is purification through action without caring about the fruits of the action, without trying to get the fruits of the action. So for instance, charity work, or if you go to another country and build houses, or if you go and help like people with water systems, or in your own community, if you help your friend move without wanting anything, it's the way that it's done with the prayer of God move through me and let my hands do good work, karma yoga. And very, very important to practice that so that you learn to not become so attached to the results, which helps you to even create better results.
Absolutely. And also, so another definition that we use for karma yoga is selfless service. And it's a very interesting topic because sometimes we talk about, is it really possible to be selfless, and is that actually good? But it's not so much that you should be selfless your whole life in every way, but in those acts of service, like she's talking about, in these moments of karma yoga where you're like, I'm just here to serve, I'm just here to give, let that be the truth. Because if it has this underlying motive of getting, or somehow that there's like this transactional, then it goes from the pure energy of that into business, which business is not bad. It's just a totally different path that we're talking about. So with karma yoga, you're literally training yourself to find joy in every moment, and that it's not about what you're getting, that truly life is all about what you give. And what actually Tony Robbins always says, that the secret to living is giving. And I think that every master, they come to that realization at some point. And karma yoga as a path teaches that.
It also encourages hard work. So just by the act. So for a lot of people, if their life is stagnant or it's become, when someone's always thinking about their own problems, they'll often has become depressed. And a lot of people are only thinking about themselves. And when you spot this, if you can get them to do it, you encourage them to go do hard, like movement stuff with the body. That's a hard work in service of others. And what this does is they get to see, like, there's something like when you're always in your head, you're thinking about your own problems, and you go and you touch the world and you make something, and that something is for the benefit of someone else. It's extremely healing. Yeah, you go and you do some hard work and you look back and you see right now, not in 10 years, that the fruit of what you did, and it's as a prayer, as a blessing, very, very healing. And it gets us off of the focus on our own problems.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about the first yoga teacher training that I went to 16 years ago. It was part of the teacher training curriculum requirement that we did karma yoga. And so they actually required us to clean the toilets for free. And I was like, all right, every week. And so, in the beginning, we were like, I can't believe we have to do this. And we were really suffering through it and miserable and maybe even complaining. I would probably say, I can't remember. But basically, and then after a few weeks, we were like singing and having joy about it, because the shift happened inside where it was like, okay, well, I have to do this and there's a purpose for this. Let me find joy in this experience. And then it transcended even that, and just being like, every moment can be joy. And so it also teaches you that like every moment can be joy, whether you're cleaning a toilet for free or whether you're doing whatever you enjoy the most normally, and I think that that's another one of the beautiful blessings of karma yoga.
Yeah, it's exactly that. The downfall of karma yoga, yeah, this is where it can go wrong, is let's say that you have a family, you have children, you need to support them. But you decide that you want to fly to another country and become a karma yogi. So what we have here is an avoidance of your duty. You have a duty that you must fulfill, and that is actually your karma yoga. And you must do it with the attitude of savor, the attitude of service. You must find that. And so that's just one example. We see that many people will use karma yoga as a way to run from their life. And what my teacher would say is, you must be able to tend your own garden first before you go and teach gardening to others.
That's true. And the important thing too, like what she just mentioned, is that when you really look at whatever is in front of you as that is your work, meaning if it's your family, just approaching that with that same energy of selfless service and however I can serve to allow God to stream through me so that my energy can be a blessing to everyone around me in whatever way that I'm capable of. That is the energy of karma yoga. So you can apply that to your relationship. You can apply that to your doing the dishes in your own house, whatever your chores are, whatever your actual work is. And you want to try to apply that energy to everything that you do eventually. And I think that that's kind of like you're strengthening the muscle by doing it for others. But then in the end of the day, you want to just have that same energy with everything you do.
Live stream God out your fingertips.
Exactly.
All right. And so that brings us to number 4, which is Raja Yoga. And Raja Yoga is considered the royal path. And usually before Raja Yoga, there's some Hatha Yoga. So Hatha Yoga is working with do you want a chair?
Yeah, my love.
Oh, no. Right on the board. Okay, perfect. So with Raja Yoga, it's called the royal path because something came before it. Yeah. And so usually something that came before it is yogis will work with Hanta, so different cleansing kriyas, Hanta postures to get the body in a good enough condition, Hanta, the meditation, to just get in a good enough condition that they can begin to walk this royal path. And Raja Yoga has 8 limbs. And the limbs all work together, but we present them as 8 separate things, but they're not really separate. Now, when we learn something in yoga, the process of unification, and this is something you should write down just so you have a formula for it. So this is, you've always heard yoga is union, but there's a process of unification that you can apply to anything, whether it's physical body stuff, higher teachings, whatever you want to apply to. And it goes like this. First, you identify that which you're going to look at. So if we're going to work with yoga of the hand, find hand. You really identify hand. Come to know what's in the hand, what are the bones, the muscles, how can it move, everything about hand. And then once you've identified, the next thing you do is you begin to purify that. So now I identify the hand and I say, how can I get this in an optimal condition? So purification of the mind and purification of the hand, slightly different things, but the idea is the same. Yeah, and when you purify the mind, you find you're able to sit with an emptiness and a clarity without it always being active. Okay, and the third step is reintegration. So now that you've identified the thing, cleaned it up, now you bring it back as part of the whole, but with much more causation in the area. Your hand is your hand. And you understand it really well. Your mind is your mind. Reintegration. Does that make sense? That's the process of unification. And then you find that you become the CEO, the boss, the director, the spirit of all the things that are gathered upon you, which includes your body, your energies, your chakras, your mind, your life, your relationships, all of that is gathered upon you. And this principle of unification can be applied to anything. Making sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that I'll say about that is that when, like, the whole purpose of yoga, the actual word is to yoke, which is to become whole or to unify, kind of like what she's saying. So that's really the purpose of all the path of yoga. And so every little breakdown of it that we're going to go through, it's just making it more specific in the different ways that the science of yoga over 5, maybe 10,000 years has been explained through, many masters. But the big picture is that they're always all roads lead to Rome, right? So they're always leading to the same intention. And that's really what the path of yoga, I think the blessing of it is that you can take almost any path, and if you're on a good, guided path, then you're going to actually get to the same result.
This is so nice. I love having you here. It's usually just me up here. It's so nice. I love co-lecturing, and it's so nice for you guys because you get to hear two different voices on the same thing, which gives a better perspective. I love this.
Cool. Yeah, I like it.
So,
And we have
Josh has written this up here on the board, and we just want to review and make sure 4 paths of yoga: Bhakti, Jhana, Karma, Raja. What you guys are primarily learning is Raja Yoga, and we'll understand that, but the others are not separate. Yeah, these are part of it, because as you see when we go through the 8 limbs, the 8 limbs all include aspects of this. And then here, she wrote down just a nice clarification for how you can yoke or unify with something. First, you got to know it to bring it to you. Making sense? Excellent. Okay, so let's start with yamas and niyamas. Who's ever heard of yamas and niyamas? I'll send you guys. I have a nice page for this. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's super. So I'm going to send you super. Yeah, you can write down if you feel like it. But everything that I'm teaching you, you'll get a link to. It's from this amazing Swami. He is a brilliant writer. I have no need to read it, and his website is built with links to everything. So if there's a word you don't understand, you have a whole page on that explaining the prep. So it's an exceptional resource, this site. So I'll send it to you. So you guys, you don't need to take notes. You can just kind of listen. Yeah. Any questions on any of this so far? Oh, how fantastic.
Yes, I do. The purified, what would that include? Like that stuff I missed.
No problem. That's a good question. So let's think about it like, if I want to know my kitchen sink, and I come to the kitchen sink and it's got a bunch of dishes in it and it's got dust and the rags are dirty. What do I do? Kitchen sink. What's going on here? And I put my attention there and I begin to touch it and I begin to explore and I begin to know, and I clean the dishes, purify. So what is the actual thing here? You know, because oftentimes we might think that the sink is actually this gross thing with dishes if we never really explored it. Just like we might think the foot is a dead thing. But if we explore it like we began to today, what you saw is all of a sudden you gotta, it purified. You naturally clean it because you as a spirit, you bring goodness, you bring purity. Anything that's not bringing that is actually not you. It's something you've picked up. That's what we're purifying away. We're washing the dishes of our soul, of our mind, of our body, of our ankle, of our knee, all of it. Purify means to get to know something and to remove what's not it. So then you have kitchen sink that's just kitchen sink. You have hand that's just hand without the past injuries and issues. You purify, make in a great state.
I like that. Remove what's not it.
Remove what's not it. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone asked in the group, I think it's Christina. She asked.
Oh, yeah, she has a good question.
She had a good question. Yeah, she said, "What is the shortcomings of karma yoga?"
Shortcomings of karma yoga are to avoid the duty of your own life. So, for instance, if you decide to go and do karma yoga, you're a teenager, you haven't created families, you don't have strong. It's a really good time. Is that youth time to do karma yoga? Excellent. But now let's say you're a householder, you have a family, you have a wife, you have people that rely on you to say, okay, I'm going for a year to install water systems in Africa. Well, that's a good thing to do. You're actually not, you're avoiding your family and you break all of their hearts when you don't do your correct duties.
But one thing that I suggest, one of my friends, she had these children, she had really spoiled them and they were just rotten because they grew up with a lot of money and they were just terrible. And I said, you need to take them to Africa and have them volunteer. And so you can bring your family on these things.
That's different. That's
different.
This
is it. So this is like an option to that option is what I'm saying. Is like, yeah, if you're trying to avoid it, then that's the shortcut.
There's an avoidance. It needs to be a seva that's correct. So you have karma, which means action. You have dharma, which means duty. Yeah, you have your duty. You have your obligation. You have a duty, especially as a yogi, as a spiritual being, to improve the relationships with everyone in your life consciously. So what that means is if you have a history of not good relationship with your parents, it takes 2 people to destroy a relationship, 1 to repair it. And as a yogi, you have a higher knowledge and a higher ability. So you have a higher response ability, which is the ability to respond to something. You can put a new relationship there, you can heal. Yeah, might need some technical aspects, but you want to know that that is your dharma, your duty. As you come to know this information, you have an obligation with this information to use it. not to act like others, and to help people become more themselves, which is ethical. Dharma, duty. And the duty is tend your own garden, make it grow, then expand, help other people with their gardens. This is how Dharma moves. And the action of helping others is karma. Yes.
So I was on the 4 different types of yoga. So say, how does that sort of go? Where
That's a part of, so if you look here, I haven't gotten to see here this list. Here's the 8 limbs. This Yama and Miyama Asana is the posture.
I was the put, so they're okay. So then the end 4 within all of the Asana.
Only Raja Yoga has asana.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So the 8 limbs that we're going to go through, the 8 limbs comprise what's known as Raja Yoga. Bhakti Yoga, they're not doing asanas.
It's more yourself.
They might also do asanas, because you can be a Bhakti yogi and also a Raja Yoga. It's not just one, right? But it's not part of that system. The Karma yogis go and help others. They're not doing asanas. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
One other question that was asked, it was the same person. She said, Christina, she said, so does that include taking care of your elderly parents as they age? And she said it's something that she's been presented with, that she's been resisting, and she doesn't know if she's responsible for this. And it's a good question. I think, and I want to mention, I'll answer that first, and then I'd love to hear it. When I was in college, I studied culture. I studied intercultural communication and international relations. And I learned that different cultures have a different relationship to this concept, which is taking care of the elderly family members. So in some cultures, the Latin cultures, some European, in different cultures, that's part of the culture, is that it's just programmed in, it's your responsibility. Your parents are moving in with you, and you're going to help them till they pass away because they took care of you, and now you're taking care of them. And that's part of the culture. But in some cultures, like America is a big individualistic culture. So everybody is like all for themselves and not so much about the other. And so in the individualistic cultures, it's a lot less common to see people taking care of their elderly family members. And it's just not part of the culture. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. And I actually think that it's a shortcoming of our culture that we just put elderly people into homes at a certain age and leave them, as they get older. But it's an interesting conversation, because that's been a huge part of the distinguishing difference between various cultures worldwide. What culture are you from, Christina? Is she from?
She's in South Florida.
Oh, okay, so America. Okay, so that's an individualistic culture. It's a lot less responsibility that we place as a culture on that duty, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. Or if you have the ability to, if you feel called to, then I would say that you could take it on as a karma yoga project if you have the bandwidth, and so that's the important part too, that you don't just give up the rest of your life for that responsibility. And so it's not the easiest question to answer.
Yeah, you answered it perfectly. The answer is exactly what she said in the end. So we have many different situations. As a being in this world and as a yogi, I know that you might have the idea of the renunciant path of renouncing worldly goods. This is only a portion. Yeah, it's one step, which is to renounce the world, but a lot of people get stuck there. The next step is now I come back and I create something called artha. And artha means wealth. Yeah. In other words, because I understand the world, it's not against me. So I grow fruit. If I'm a farmer, if I'm a business person, the business expands. And you have this duty to actually create artha. Now, if your life has had many tangles, and you weren't able to do that, and you end up towards, the middle of your life and your parents are elderly, and you are in a bad situation. Okay, while in your heart you may feel the biggest love and the biggest responsibility, your ability to take action is limited by the hard karmas that you've lived through. Okay, so in that situation, if you try to provide an assistance that you can't legitimately provide, 2 people go down, you and the parent. So if you have made yourself in a good condition, then of course you take care of others. But then as they age, if they start to have things like dementia and Alzheimer's, and you don't actually have the capacity to, that's when you get help. And if you have artha, you're able to bring a nurse, you're able to have care, you're able to provide in a lovely way. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. And so you have to be honest about your capabilities. And when I say that, I'm encouraging you to become more capable. They do, right? Because once you renounce, then you go flow to. Now, who do we want running the companies? Yogis. Yeah, there's nothing, yoga has no problem with wealth. In fact, you should be able to create it. Otherwise, the ashram doesn't survive.
Actually, in that note, they said that Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, he only had one book on his iPad. When he passed away, they found it was the autobiography of a yogi.
Such a good book.
Isn't that cool?
Such a good
And
book.
he created one of the largest companies in the whole world. And a lot of actually really successful people are yogis. They just don't broadcast it, as much because they're out there doing their work, in the business realm. So, but I've learned that over the years, a lot of them are, and especially at least doing meditation. And they may not be the Raja Yoga path where they're doing the asanas, but they probably should too, just for their health. But they're probably in some way feeling connected to the Jnana or the Bhakti path, because it takes a certain amount of selfless service and devotion to dedicate your life to even running a big company, and it can never be all about profits or you'll never succeed. So those people that really succeed on that level, generally they're coming from a place of service, and they're always seeing, how can I offer the most value to the world? And in return for that, they get a lot of money back. Right? So
Yeah, companies can be very good. We have this idea because we hear about a lot of bad companies, but an organization can be really good, can be really healing, can be really uplifting. Making sense? Hi, Bonadevi. Good to see you. How are you? She's coming to us from Hawaii. It's like 4 a.m. there, so we got some hardcore morning yogis also here. Okay, so let's begin to unpack the 8-limb path. So the first two things we want to talk about are known as Yama and Miyama. And a Yama, and you're going to get a paper of this, but you can write it down if you want, is codes of restraints or abstinences. Yeah, so it's something that you restrain. Yeah, like let's say you have a compulsive chocolate eating habit. Restraint. You learn to apply. Sometimes yes, but not all the time.
That's a bad example.
And your niyamas are observances for self-training. And I have a great chart on this. Now, it's interesting that these the yamas and niyamas, they move in a certain order where you learn to overcome a certain dimension of your experience. So for instance, yama, the first one is known as aparigraha. Oh, that's great. Some more Sanskrit.
These are on the exam, by the way.
Oh.
And it's in the Journey to Joyful
But
book.
I'm going to send you guys a link. Yeah, you need to read this. Yeah. Okay, so this means non-grasping, non-holding to, non-possessiveness. Yeah,
This is an important one.
it's right here. You can look up.
It's in Journey to Joyful as well.
And we'll write them on the board. Yamas, yes. Mhm. A yama means something that you control. That's a restraint. So for instance, the compulsion to grasp and hold to things, yeah? This compulsion, you restrain that. So for instance, one of the ways that you can practice this, and this will mess you up a little bit, is you can go into your closet, pick something that you really love, and give it to someone you don't know. They see what the collective. See? You see how that brought it right up? But if I said give it to someone you know and love, you see how there's no problem. Maybe a little bit, but totally different.
Yeah. The other word for it is non-attachment. So it's this attachment. It's actually in my book, The Journey to Joyful. There's a whole chapter on that because I really believe attachment is one of the 3, what I call emotional prison keepers, which is what keeps us in this suffering state, so what you grasp onto and the different words that they use for this, but it's this possessiveness. It's like you use that with people. Relationships are one of the worst that this happens. You want to hold on to them, and it's like the more you want to keep something, it's almost like the universe is going to teach you how to let go by taking it away. And I don't know if you guys had that experience, but I learned that over and over until I totally learned it. And you'll keep learning it until you master these things. They're like, and again, we'll take everything away again. Like everything that I loved, you know, in my life, like even my mother, you know, just died in front of me. And so when you have these experiences, you're like, you deepen this understanding, because it's that attachment to it that causes such deep suffering. When you can just relax and just realize that everything's literally in divine and perfect order, and we don't own anything. We don't even really own our body, you know, we're like renting this, and we'll be like, you know, moving on at a certain point. So once you realize that, then you can feel a lot more relaxed about things coming and going in life, whether it's people or things. And I think that lately, because when all the fires hit California, I had a number of people that I knew that lost their homes in fires. And I feel like that's like the ultimate teaching of this, is when you lose everything in that way, and you're just like, okay, we're starting over. And what a blessing, because to learn that, you can really rise into such a mastery of your energy. And I feel that that's what the yamas are really all about.
That's exactly correct. Now, here's an interesting thing, is that the yamas and the niyamas work together. So normally the yamas are given in an order, and you get those in the niyamas, but I'm going to give you the comparative niyama, because you'll see how they work together. So a niyama is something you do. So the niyama that goes with aparigraha, or grasping, is known as saucha, or purity, to make something clean, right? So if we think back to the dish, the sink full of dishes, yeah, we're holding to things that are not good. Think about how many things you keep that you really don't use and you really don't need, right? Even the dirt, yeah, to make things clean, we're letting go of something, we're sweeping out the old. And so saucha, cleanliness, cleaning the body, washing the old, purity, this idea works together with a parigraha. So we're not holding to the old self. Does this make sense to you guys? Are you cool with that?
And that's also when we do cleansing, like when we did the 3-day juice cleanse. I think that any of those things, and also the kriyas, like a lot of the practices that we do are really teaching this. And it's like you go through this process where, just for an example, when you think about fasting, you know, everybody loves food. So when you try to go without it for a day, all of a sudden you go into this frantic state, and the state is like, I need food, and the grasping, and like the needing, and this attachment to it. But what the nice thing is that all the practices of yoga teach is that, for example, whether it's fasting, kriyas, or anything. Oh, can somebody please mute? Okay, this one. Sorry. That like it teaches you get through a certain point, and then you have a breakthrough, and then at the other side of it, you realize, wow, actually, I didn't need that thing at all. And that's the aha, huge breakthrough of your life, when your whole life is being consumed and controlled by this one attachment. We can also call those addictions or obsessions, but there's different levels of attachment, right? But when you let go of addictions, obsessions, or attachments in this way, it's like liberation in the greatest sense. And in my view, I feel that one of the greatest attainments, or I guess intentions of yoga, is this state of liberation, the feeling that you're not bound by anything, and especially not your own mind.
Yes, please. Yeah, no, it's good. We want questions, because there's no point in piling more stuff if it's not digested.
So obviously, I completely understand non-attachment with things, or maybe other people in relationships. When it sort of comes to family members, I'm just going to celebrate your mama. How do you sort of have non-attachment to them, because you love them sort of so much? Sort of, what's the difference? You know, I think everyone's so naturally attached to their family members or their husbands.
Love is an attachment. So let's look at this. So let's say like Dashima's mother has passed, or my mother has passed. Now, of course, the attachment, the loss, you can't hold to it. It's going to change anyways. But did the love change? That doesn't, yeah. So that's there. Yeah, very different. Attachment means to grasp to something, but there's nothing you can hold to in this universe. It's constantly changing.
You sort of love it, but let it be.
And because you're gonna eventually lose everything.
That's what I mean.
Everything eventually you'll lose it. So whether it's your mother or your own body, all of it goes. Nothing comes with to the next stage, right? So that's this like interesting lesson that everybody has to learn in life. So Christina asked the question. What was the question? The question was about the attachment to a mother or somebody like that you love in that way versus like your things, which can feel much easier to let go of attachment. But how do you approach attachment when it comes to somebody like your mother? And the response was that love and attachment are two very different things, right? So,
yeah, that's exactly it. So So there's the spirit essence of something, and then there's the form of it. And the essence of your mother doesn't die. It's unborn, it's undying, it's unchanging. It's always awake, it's always aware. But the things on top of it, they come and they go and they change, the mind changes and the personalities change and the stories change. All of that's malleable. But the essence never changes, it's unchanging. And so love is the desire of two people to be close together. Yeah, it's this high affinity, it's a high degree of closeness. And that is a spiritual principle. It doesn't exist because that affinity is like wanting to share the same space. Nothing in the physical universe can share the same spaces. Yeah, but what do you feel when you love somebody? It's as if they're you. So the space is shared. So we know that love is a non-physical thing. Therefore, when something changes a physical shape, the love doesn't come or go. The love is a non-physical thing. And you can feel that when you just look at it. Like if your family members change form and leave the body, does your love towards them change? No. So it's not physical.
One of the things though, because I lost my mother, and I feel that one of the things that, if you didn't lose anybody like that yet, it's important that to be in the yogic path, you start to work with this in your meditations of the non-attachment and stuff, because it will help so much when that day does come, because it will eventually come.
I feel like a fear of the moment I get, because I've lost anyone like that.
Yeah.
It's sort of practicing that non-attachment, and then I sort of felt a bit bad, like, oh, is it making it that I don't love them? But
no, it'll make you, if you
that,
really
yeah.
do it, it'll make you love them more, because what it does is it'll dissolve a lot of the temporary, if there's any temporary issues in the relationship, when you frame it as like, everything's changing and could change shape, when you see that, it makes you able to actually overcome minute, unimportant things and really be with the other spirit better. So it's actually good. It's good to know, it's good to understand that death is not an enemy.
Or the end.
Or the end, yeah. And it's good. And as a yogi, you must endeavor to overcome fear of death as swiftly as possible. As swiftly as possible.
Exactly.
You must, and that's just the truth, whether you're comfortable hearing it or not. And that's death of the self is one thing, death of others is another, but you must be able to overcome all shapes of death. Yeah. And you must be comfortable with the feeling of dying 10,000 times a second so that you can be close to somebody. Because what do we do when a lot of times we see death, even like the pet dies, and when they die, it stimulates such a loss. And what do? You turn away and away from your spirit. But if you can overcome that turning away and instead flow to them and be with them in their death, it's a very beautiful thing.
And I really believe that anything, whether it's death of somebody or pet or the loss of anything, the purpose of that experience in our human experience is to bring us closer to God. And that spirit energy, and anybody who's lost a lot or had a lot of trauma or tragedy, generally the most spiritual people that probably right? So what happens is you have two choices. You either die from this pain of the attachment and the grief process that happens in the human experience, or you turn to God and you realize and you trust and you have this faith and you have this knowing that nothing is ever gone, and that is the only place that you can find that truth is through whatever you want to call it, the source of life, God, whatever. But the ever-present energy that is so confirming and reassuring and comforting that it gives you this peace that you can't find in the grieving process anywhere else. So that's what I really believe why we actually even have these experiences in the human form, so that we can deepen our connection to spirit.
And with that, the love and the attachment, I believe I've overcome the attachment to loss because I've had so much personal loss in my life.
Yeah, you got a lot of practice.
Now for me, the attachment, letting go of that and just being the love is for my children. So, and I kind of feel that the attachment a little bit, when I really looked at it, is a little bit of control when you're a parent wanting the best for your children, or they're not doing the best that you think is the best for them. And that energy inside of you is just, it's death for me.
You
so
have to become
learned
their
to
friend.
Just be in love for them and for my partner. Like not be attached to what they do, what he does, what he doesn't do. It's never ending. So I'm learning to be more and more of that. Coming here has been a big part of it for me. But just be the love for people in your life currently, and they'll feel it, and it's just beautiful how it's turning out for me.
Nice.
So attachment means also little control, and I don't want to do that.
That's absolutely right. And you know, the control element is I really feel it's like the exact opposite of trust. Because you want to control things because you don't trust that it's actually going to be fine. So you're like, it needs to be this way because I know better. That's the ego. So the ego always has this false perception that it can control things. And actually, I really feel that control is a myth. You can't control anybody. You try to control them, they're going to do the opposite of whatever you say. You try to control the life, and life will do the opposite just to prove you that you got to let go of that control. And so it's another one of those lessons that goes hand in hand with the love and the attachment and the loss and the death and all of that. It's like control is one of those ego mechanisms of the mind. And I always say the ego and the mind are best friends. And so when you're stuck in your mind and you're stuck in your ego. And so if you can get out of your mind, you get out of your ego, you get into your heart. And that's when you go, oh, they're going to be fine. I trust.
So freeing.
Yeah. You have a question?
I just had something to add. In one of my other courses, we were required to read Being with Dying by Roshi Joan. But it really gave me some insight as well into like the process of death, and like we're all dying daily, like our cells are turning over, like death is, and it really gave a lot of insight on how to like kind of process people dying in your life, or just the idea of death, because there's so much fear around it. It's called Being with Dying.
Being with Dying, for anyone on the
It's a
call.
book.
Yeah.
It's a book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and one of the things, just to talk about that for a second too, is like, you remember the other time when we were talking about the nature of existence, let's call this the universe, and then there's like, most of it is black hole, empty space, and we don't label that as bad, that it's black hole, empty space, and then there's like a little bit of light, which is the stars and the different types of things that are going on in existence. But in human experience, that black hole empty space is what we call death. And it feels scary because it's the unknown. So it's also the uncertainty. And I feel like right now in the world, especially with COVID, this is what's been the biggest problem for everybody, is having to deal with uncertainty, because that's that black hole empty space. And we label it as bad because we're afraid of the unknown. And I remember having this experience when I was maybe between 26 and 27, I had this huge like resistance to what I call the mystery. So the mystery is the uncertainty and the unknown, right? And it's like when you haven't been through this yet, you might have this experience where if you just want to know, like you want to know things and you want to have the answer and you want the thing right now. And then the opposite of that is being totally accepting and loving the idea of the mystery, and however it unfolds is beautiful, and you don't really care how it goes because it's going to be great because you trust. But this opposite of that is what I was suffering a lot, which was I didn't know what the future held, so I was afraid of everything, and I was afraid of losing things, so I would try to hold on, and whenever I tried to hold on, it would always run away, and it was this horrible experience that I was having. So I remember when I overcame that, and it was just the hugest blessing, because then I started to actually love the mystery. And it's like actually loving that black hole. You don't know anything about the black hole or the empty space, but it's there, and you can't even imagine life without it, because it's necessary as part of that divine experience of existence. And we have all of that within us as well. Like she was saying, our cells are always dying and always being reborn. We've been having this conversation over and over lately as well about dying to your old self, your old identity, and recreating yourself in every moment, or even in a huge way as a huge transition, as that metamorphosis, the butterfly being born and coming out of that old form of the caterpillar. And so this is happening literally all the time, every day, every week, every month. Women, every month we have that shedding. It's the same thing. So we have that cycle. And then every year you have that happening. And then throughout the whole life, and then even lifetimes and lifetimes, we have this happening, right? And so it's literally something that it's probably one of the most important things you can learn to be comfortable with. So hopefully that helps. The mystery of life and the black hole nothingness. It's actually where the magic is.
So you guys can see how grasping and cleanliness work together. So we practice not grasping, and we increase cleanliness, not to create an obsession, because that's another kind of grasping, but as a general protocol. Making sense? Excellent. So next up, we have Brahmacharya. So Brahmacharya is one of the most mistranslated, misunderstood topics. Brahmacharya has to do with the sexual energy or restraining that particular energy. Now, in general, we say that you want to, because what happens to people is when that begins to arise in them in their puberty, they get this very strong compulsion. That compulsion can be, all of a sudden the life changes and we see all of these dramas begin to ensue. Think about how many dramas you get in your life because of dating. Yeah, because of boys, because of girls, because of this sexual energy. And so Brahmacharya is taking this force and deciding how to express it. Hello, speaking of Brahmacharya.
She's a Brahmacharya. No, she's not. She's humping everybody's legs. Don't confuse her.
So this, if we begin to kind of look at it, like the sexual energy is a force that we can direct towards any kind of creation. Okay, so we can use it as sex, no problem. But if we use it in a way that destroys our life, we would not call this an intelligent thing. And that's why Brahmacharya it needs to restrain this energy. Now that doesn't mean to repress. It means that if I'm feeling horny and I'm hanging out with my girlfriend's husband, I have some restraint, right? Yeah, it's like, why? Because that's how ethics, and what do a lot of people do? They do very unethical things because of this energy, because they haven't developed the restraint. Does this make sense? So it's not repress it, it's, hey, would you like that? If you want to express it in that way, find a good partner. So when it doesn't damage you. Yeah, because otherwise, this is the place where most people's lives derail. And so in yoga, we're looking at Brahmacharya as kind of the right action of that energy. Now, if you don't have someone in your life, yeah, well, I was a Brahmacharya for a number of years and I practiced this consciously, okay? Which means no sex, no sexual impulses. And what you do is you take that area and you just redirect it. So I take the energy and it drives it towards hyper creativity. Yeah, I wrote albums, I did music, I made amazing things. Yeah, and then the thing is that becomes so fulfilling. You find that the interest in having sex is only within a relationship where there's high degree of love and affinity. Not like a painful relationship, not a dramatic relationship, because you have such a beautiful control over that energy that you only have sex if it's actually for that. There's no need, there's no compulsion. And what's happening is that we actually take that energy, and there's a specific kriyas, and we redirect it up to higher chakras. It's done consciously, not accidentally, and it feels nothing like depression. It's taking a force and using it somewhere else. Making sense? Yes.
I have a question. So I had read something about like how you can manifest like through orgasm. Like so like you can use the sexual energy and like direct it in that way. But this is different. You're actually restraining it and using it.
You're directing it,
So,
but it's still the
you're
same
directing it,
energy.
But it's
It's the same energy. It's just whether you have a partner or you're just using your own energy. It's still the
Right.
same energy.
yeah.
Yeah, for a lot of people, their only feeling of creation is through sex. Yeah, and what we're saying here has nothing to do with sex or no sex. It's not a dramatization of right and wrong in that area, but it's very much a kind of logical observance of that force as something that can create really heavy harms for you. And what we want is we want to make it conscious. So there are many practices as a yogi. As a woman, if you know your correct practices, after you have sex, you restore your energy because it has an effect. Yeah. But if you're a real yogi, you can generate tremendous amounts of prana from that area. But first you must learn how to restrain it. And that's the problem is you think, well, but because it's fine to have sex, then I can do it anyways. Yeah, but can you not do it? And now you see you don't have control in the area.
And also
So-
you mastering that non-attachment, because usually that's the reason it causes a destruction, is because when you have sex with somebody, even if they're a love partner or if they're just a random person, that you create cords and bonds and then those attachments. And that's when you're faced with all of that, which comes from the attachment as well. So it's like binding you in different ways. But if you can have sex without any of that, and just purely utilizing it for an energetic practice to manifest your dreams, fine. You know, so it just depends on your level of mastery in that.
Fine, but hold on. If you can have sex without any of all that stuff, then really why have it? Like, but really, like as a, like why, like that's how I feel, because I spend all day healing people. I have tons of energy. I see I'm like a fireball because I'm Brahmacharya. Now I have a husband. If I want to have sex, I have sex, but I don't need to. There's no, it's just because we have a very high level of affinity in our relationship. It's a very healthy relationship. So there's no compulsion. So by saying you can have it, you can't, the thing you need to get to is, can I have it without that being something where I feel some sort of compulsion? Because then you just redirect it. Anything can be your sex. When I plant the garden, it's like sex. When, you know what I mean? Like I use that energy because I put that romance, I put that into it. And that's Brahmacharya.
Writing, dancing, your art, whatever you
Creation.
Because sex is creative energy, and it's like, so you can utilize it for how you can create a child, you can create a business, you can create a house, you can create anything with that. And I agree with you. But what I meant was that if you did decide to, even though there wasn't a compulsion, but you were like, yeah, let's manifest. Let's say you have a guy and you're like, let's manifest.
Yes, and it's not a drama.
Yeah,
You
you can do that. And it's no problem. Yeah, come together, do that, and that's fine. And then it's just like a yogic practice. Perhaps you could consider it like that.
I have to touch one more thing on this, because here's the trap. There's a trap here, and I have to say it to ladies. You have been told from an early age that your freedom somehow, you know, culturally, not necessarily religiously, that for you to be a free woman is, I can have sex with whoever I want. Okay? But I would say that very few people can actually do that, because afterwards there are repercussions, whether it's emotionally or attachment wise. Now, what Dashan is saying, can you do that without any of that shit? And if that shit's there, any shit, can you be honest? There's some shit here, and look at that. Because only by, if you say, well, no, I'm free, but you're not really free, then you need to catch yourself and say, okay, what actually happened? Because you make yourself blind. You shouldn't lie to yourself. When I sleep with this guy this week and another guy this week, and maybe it's a month apart, I don't care the interval. Maybe it's one a year. Maybe it's one a day. What is the actual thing that happens to your consciousness? And there's not a right or wrong answer, but you have to look. Because if you lie to yourself and say you're fine and you're not, you don't notice, whole life can downward spiral very quick. Yeah, so you have to look at it. And if it's true, it's true. If it's not, it's not. Or if it's true to this money, it causes a little thing, but you can handle that. It's not a rigid thing, but you must look and be honest. And that might change.
Yeah, I think that this is one of the most important things that humans experience as just part of the life school is this like kind of dance between the compulsion and in the Buddhist tradition, and when I did Vipassana, they called it aversion and grasping. So grasping is that kind of attachment. The aversion is like what you're resisting or pushing away. So it's like life is constantly this dance between what you're grasping for and what you're pushing away. I want this, I don't want that. I like this, I don't like that. And that's this constant just drama in your mind all the time that causes a lot of chaos, a lot of suffering, headaches, whatever it's causing. And so the Buddhist philosophy of meditation is to transcend the grasping and the aversion. They use the word anicca. So anicca is to transcend the grasping and the aversion and to just be. And in that beingness, that's where you have your liberation. And
which brings us to our next Yama, which is Santosha Contentment. Yeah, this is such a good, so this works with Brahmacharya. These two work together. Brahmacharya is restraining the sexual force. Santosha is I'm content. In other words, I can be with someone, totally beautiful man, feel no need. I'm content. There's no problem. And so this is Santosha, this practicing of contentment, which doesn't mean like a hang dog, you're okay, I'm fine with it. Nah, it's like, it's just like this peaceful content. I can be just whatever is, I am.
Yeah, so Santosha, you want to practice that in everything in life. Like, okay, whatever is for lunch, I don't like anything on the table, I'm happy no matter what. Okay, these mosquitoes are eating me alive. I'm happy no matter what. Okay, like this leg stretch is killing me. I'm happy no matter what. It's literally just like transcending that attachment and aversion that I talked about. That like, because that's what causes the pain.
Yep, okay, so this is something you practice. Brahmacharya is something you restrain. Okay, so Santosha, you cultivate. I grow it in me. I bring it to life in me. I consciously, and Santosha, contentment, doesn't mean you don't take action. I can move very fast.
Yeah, me and more.
Yeah, exactly. Not as fast as me and more.
Puppy, little one, come here, babies.
So I can make any motion, and it doesn't mean we're dull. Content is a stable. All right, so that brings us to number 3, asteya. Asteya means non-stealing. Okay, so theft is an interesting thing. You think about theft like stealing an item, but did you know that you steal other people's traumas?
Or their time.
Or their time.
People steal your time all the time.
But traumas, did you know you hear about something bad that happened to somebody, you take the picture with you?
I sometimes feel that if I'm quite anxious, while some of my friends are going through some trauma, I get a sense of worry and it's nothing to do with
It's
me.
nothing to do with you.
Sometimes I'm more stressed than they.
Yeah, you
That
steal
people
it.
feel
Yeah, you take it. Yeah, you take it. You steal it from them. Yeah, it's not yours. It's such an interesting thing. So asteya is a really, really, you can apply it to a lot of things. We think of it like stealing physical stuff. People can steal your time. You can steal your time. People can steal your ideas. Yeah, you can steal other people's images, pictures, ideas, their stories, their dramas. Now you can steal it, you can take it with you, and it's not yours. Yeah?
Yeah. And it's a stealing, but it's like not always conscious. So you're kind of like taking something, right? And whenever I've noticed this in the past, like you ever had somebody that like they always call you to dump on you and they take your, it's stealing energy. So we call these energy vampires. But you know, they literally like bring in the negative and they just dump it all over and then they go. And so you have to be very, we call this energy hygiene. You have to be very conscious about your boundaries of what you're willing to allow in your life. Because if you allow people to steal from you, if you allow people to steal your energy, your time, or your things, whatever, anything like that, then it's like disrespecting your own soul, you know. And so the soul over time starts to feel weaker and weaker with the continuous allowing of these things. And so in order to, we call it like take your power back. It's actually a process of literally changing those behaviors. And when you notice that behavior might be happening again, where you're allowing someone to steal from you, or you're doing it to someone else, any of that, that you put your foot down and you say, I'm changing this behavior right here and right now, and then not allowing it. And it's in that process of cutting those experiences off that you kind of like take back all the energy that you've been giving away or allowing to be stolen. And then you become more confident, more whole, and more of who you are. So it's such an important part of the process.
You have the ability to tap into unending amounts of energy. But with that also comes the ability to not follow stupid dramas of others. Do you see that it's the same thing? Discernment, yeah, you have discernment. So if you have a friend who's in a tragedy and they pull on you a lot, you sit there and you look and you say, okay, what's the right mercy here? And sometimes you have to say something very directly. And then they yell at you, they freak out, but you stay steady and you say it again. Yeah. So sometimes you say to somebody, I don't have the time to do a 2-hour session with you. You want to book a private next week? Yeah, I'll clear some time. Okay. So now you see what I'm doing is called putting the ethical exchange in. there are 4 types of exchange, and you should understand this, because if you do any but the 4th one, you will not expand in life. Okay, so the first level of exchange is like criminal exchange. Now, this is like someone takes something for you, from you. They tell you, oh, I'm going to sell you a boat, you give them money, you get no boat. Okay, this is a criminal act. But we don't want to do that. The next is partial exchange. And partial exchange is you tell me that you're going to sell me a boat, I give you the money. You give me a boat, but it's not the boat I paid for. It's you showed a really nice picture. This is like half sunk in the harbor. Yeah,
It's a dinghy.
yeah, it's a dinghy. So like a partial exchange. Okay, that's not going to help you. The third is fair exchange. So you want to buy a boat from me, I sell you a boat. Okay, and the 4th is exchange and abundance. So you want to buy a boat from me, I sell you a boat, and when you go to the boat, it's full of some nice flowers, some champagne, some chocolate, a nice note, a blessing. I give you the thing, and I give something extra.
Or chefs.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So now when you have somebody, and this applies to marriages, friendships, family relationships, relationship of parent to child. Yeah, obviously a baby is a different exchange. But once they're 5 years old, they actually need to put out their own space, and you make trade with them. Why? It gives them value. Yeah, pitying someone and paying them, for work that you don't value doesn't help them. So what do you do with anybody? You put the exchange in a fair way. Yeah, and now there are different ways that you can do exchange. You can do money to money. Yeah, my hourly rate to your hourly rate, something like this. Yeah, money to money. You can do trade, which is you make sure it's fair. So if my computer programmer charges 40 an hour and this person charges 300, then it's going to take a lot more hours of his time to equal this. The hours are not equal. And you can do charity. Okay, and charity is charity. So I don't do donation-based classes. I either do free or I charge.
That's how I am too.
Yeah, I just don't. It's either a charity and I'm giving. This is just a save up to me. It's a giving. Yeah, and it's clear. And then there's nothing in me that gets in the way, nothing in them. It's very clear what it is. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so you can do this charity with your friends, but you have to have a look at what's actually happening, because you can bring unlimited energy, but only if you know how to handle energy. And so when you start to feel that the exchange is out, you need to listen to that and not throw them away, because they don't know. Remember, no being is bad. They just have a pattern or a heaviness or a density or a trouble. And you just tell them, I love you so much. I wish I could solve this problem. What are you going to do about it? And you put it back on them to solve it. What are you going to do about it? I have to go. I have an appointment. You end the conversation. That's it, gracefully.
Does anybody here ever have that experience where you feel responsible to help people, but at the same time they always come to you, and you feel it's also not your responsibility and it's like a burden, right? So this is like a big important lesson for a lot of people, and especially for empaths, people that are naturally nurturing, loving, and healing, and you just want to help the whole world. And that's such an important point that Ray was saying about so many people also who have a lot to give. Like Michelle was a great example where she was just like giving all of her services and people would just come do everything for free. And it's like you want to give. And then after a certain point, you realize I just give and give and give. Where is the exchange?
No. Here's the problem. Let me frame this differently. You're right, but look at it this way. I love this, by the way, ladies, you're doing your, what you're actually doing, check this out, and you'll stop doing it, I'm gonna say this. When you give and you give and you give, is you're putting your friend into criminal exchange with you. You're making them a criminal, and they will lose it on you, and they will break the friendship because you put them and you didn't value them. You put them in criminal exchange. If I give and I get, I don't help my students by giving for free. I can give what I agree. This is, this is, like I said, I'm here. This is my blessing. Yeah. But otherwise, a fair rate. Why? Because I can do you a service. Because then I'm just saying you're too weak to contribute. Do you see what, so don't put your friends in criminal exchange. You must be firm in this because you actually make them sick. It's good for people to give to you. Reverse that flow.
Yeah. And also to create the value of the exchange by making it clear, because you're like, okay, this is the value. And then if somebody has a hard time with that, what I like to do is help them with their consciousness around abundance, because that's also a huge area for
She
work.
says, get a job.
Yeah, no, well, I'm like,
Help you with your consciousness around abundance. Get a job, maybe.
well, get it together. I'll give them like access to my business training thing. Here, let me help you.
Okay, good. All right. So does that make sense to you guys? Excellent. So non-stealing, there's a lot there. Now, here's the beautiful thing is that the niyama that corresponds with the steya is known as tapas. Tapas is not like the snacks that you're thinking about.
The Spanish snacks.
But tapas means austerities. Austerities mean like training and doing things you don't want to. So if you don't want to wake up early, get up early. You don't want to do this, do it, but without creating a drama. You don't want to get in the cold water, get in the cold water. Yeah, it's done like just as a conscious training. Okay, I don't want to do 100 squats. I'm going to do 100. I'm going to like it. Tapas. It's this intensity. Yeah, it's to purify the mind because why you go to the ocean, it's freezing cold. You have to get in. I remember I was trained with tapas. So my teacher would wake us up in a little ashram, ring the bell. I remember that bell. She'd ring the bell. It's 3:30 in the morning, right? Like I barely slept, but I was worried about waking up, right? And then you had to get up. You like literally like in your clothes, put on a bunch of ponchos. It was very cold, and she would take us to the freezing cold ocean, make us strip down naked, run into the water, and do kriyas.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah, so I remember the first day, this is what happened the first day. It's me and a whole bunch of other chicks were all standing on the beach, freezing cold like this. And she just takes off sprinting straight into the ocean. And I look at them shivering. And I looked at her, and I looked at them. I looked at her and I said, fucking that. And I just thought about a second, I just did it. And it was not easy. Then she showed me like, how to greet the water properly and the actual like way that you like the cold. But I just went for it. And after it took me about 5 days until there was no more mind. I just would go, take the shawls off into the water. No dramatization. No, oh my God, it's going to be cold. No, just like only that's tapas.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a morning miracle,
Yes, exactly. That is tapas.
Are you kidding? Now it's just like,
Yeah, you just
That
get
sounds
up.
like nothing besides running this team.
But it's so important. And I actually did that similar but different with the Wim Hof. I did 22 days. And the first day I could only do
Very tapas.
one
Wim Hof
minute.
is totally tapas.
Yeah, his whole thing is like freeze yourself into a wake. And so the first day I could only do 1 minute and I could only hold my breath I could only do 1 minute in the cold water and then I could only hold my breath 1 minute. So I thought, okay, fine. And I was like, I'm going to just keep trying to see if I can get a little bit more. By the 22nd day, I was able to do 22 minutes in the cold, which is a freezing temperature. And I got up to 3.5 minutes with the breath hold. And after some time, like she said, you just get to a point where you're no longer thinking about it. You're not like, like the first day I was like, screaming in the water. Next 22 minutes, I'm just like calm, breathing, like I'm sending a wave of heat through my body. And there was even a man from Sweden that was doing it with me, and he was impressed because I was going along. Yeah, we ended up dating for a while, but he was like very strong, very good, like strong guy. And I was much better at it than him, and I was helping him stay longer because he was usually just running out of there after 3 minutes, and I was building up to this 22 minutes. So we would do it every day. But it was interesting because what it did for me, besides for obviously like getting to the breakthrough of it, it healed a number of things. Like one of the things I used to deal with was like this cold intolerance where I was in the cold, I would be shivering all the time, like chatter teeth, everything like freezing, and it'd be like 70 degrees. And now I can be in the snow and I'll be fine. I can be with no jacket. I could probably walk barefoot. It just heals certain things. Tapas does that for you. all those things, that's what I was talking about earlier with Buddha, is they're all in the mind. I don't like cold. I like warm. That's that I like, I don't like duality construct that happens in the mind. And then like, actually you can heal that. And then you can transcend all of that inner dialogue that goes on, monologue, dialogue, that you can eventually actually not have that experience of life anymore. You actually become a different person. And that's the cool thing about tapas. They call it the fire of transformation.
Yep. It's these hard, intense trainings that you do, and you learn how powerful you actually are, how powerful your mind can be when you, because this is purification of the mind. We oftentimes use things with the body, but it was her mind that learned to endure the 22 minutes more than anything in the body. Her mind became strong. All right, they need a break. You see the yawns? They have to get up and move. So
Okay, we're gonna take a break for 5 minutes. So we got some. Well, let's do it. Let's see. It's 10:22, so we'll do a break for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And yeah, Christina was saying it builds Sankalpa Shakti.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Welcome, Floor. And yeah, so Christina had a question. We can answer it when we come back. We're just going to take a 10-minute break and we'll be back in just a little bit.
Bonadevi. Hi. Can you chat? Put on your chat. Hi. Can we hear each other? No. No talkie.
I'm sorry. I was saying, I
Oh, there
think
you
we're on
are.
the live stream. I don't know. if-
We are.
Yeah.
I was glad to see you.
I was
I
kind of.
thought somehow she was sending us yoga. So I tried to get on the yoga a couple of times. And then all of a sudden, there you guys were. I'm like, okay. But I wasn't prepared to be seen.
I know, me
I'm
too.
still
I
not
just
at
sort
the
of woke
moment.
up and saw my, I checked my, I was checking to see what was going on today. And
It's
there-
cool to see her in this different mode.
She's so
Like,
beautiful.
I guess we can't get into it like too much since we're, like on the internet. But it's very different to see her with somebody she's taught. Like, I see her processing all the stuff the other lady's sharing that obviously she learned from. Because isn't this one of her students?
I do not know, but I just
I
know
think
that
it is
Ray's
a-
always so perfect, so spot on with things. It's just amazing.
Yes. Oh my God, yes. I mean, I sent her a
Beautiful
before.
ladies, just FYI, you're being recorded right now.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just in case you didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so cool to see like Ray in a different mode when she's not just teaching us, but she's got a classroom full of people and somebody else teaching with her. She's just holding a different, I don't know, she feels older to me today. Like, when she's with us, she feels a certain way, but she feels different in this space. I just love seeing all the sides of it. And I actually, after Freedom's freaky picture, did a before and after of me of the day that I called her for intake and last week. And it's not quite as amazing as Freedom's, but Ray was like, holy, you know what? I can't believe it. Well done, Melissa. I mean, it was like, yeah, I've changed too. She's like, I can see her emotional state is better and my rasas were lifted and the veils, and it's true. So you should, if you have a shot, you guys, because Christina, aren't you with us on this too? I think Christiana. Do your before and after if you can, because I was actually shocked at how much good after I've got going on. Not this morning. I'm not even brushed. I mean, I was not preparing to be on camera. So I think I will get off because they look so beautiful. But I wanted to say hi because I'm missing our weekly. Yeah,
There's a
it's so
little something
nice.
for you ladies. Look up.
Beautiful, thank you. Did everybody, I guess we're all Americanas, did you have a nice Thanksgiving?
Very nice. How about
Me
you?
too. It was nice. They let me be at the spreader event. My family spreader event. We had somebody who had just flown in from Colorado off the plane to the house. It was like, really? I mean, those weren't really the rules, but we all love Laura, and she's been really depressed. We're in the New York area, and she was way out in the middle of nowhere. Well, she's not really, but she feels like she is. So that was kind of weird because I was not expecting to have that moment of we're all hugging and kissing, and now Laura just got off the plane. So that was interesting.
I'm gonna
But it was,
run to the bathroom before we come back.
please, nice to see you. Me too, actually. Bye, Bunadev. We'll see you later.
than ever. We're back and we're better than ever.
I'm definitely better.
Every second.
Is everybody there? If you're not there, raise your hand.
Hey, I just want to let you know, I checked out your live stream on YouTube and there were people asking questions there as well.
Oh,
Oh,
sure.
really? Like what? Can you tell us?
We can't find. Oh, did you find
yeah.
it?
I
Yeah,
can, let's
Where's
say,
your comment? Oh, there it is. Okay, we can. Thank you for letting us know that. That's good to know. Welcome, Lori. Let's see. We got. We're better than ever. Anyone know?
somebody on
If you're not there, raise your hand.
It's funny. 'Cause I can
I just want to let you know.
Why do I hear rage myself?
Yeah, is Pamela.
It's Pamela. Oh, you have to use that.
Oh, girls. Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're back. And we're getting started again. And we do have some questions in the chat because I have this over on YouTube. So I was like, hey, let's answer some of these people. Let's see what they're saying.
Greetings from Manila. Jesus, this is so on point.
Good.
Jesus knows too.
Yeah, we're all with
Yeah.
Jesus.
So they're asking if we can take questions.
Yeah, okay.
Now I have it up, so I have it up.
Yeah,
on
we
screen
didn't
and I'll
look
check
at
it.
that.
So go
before.
ahead and write anything in the chat. In YouTube, we still have a bit of a timeline. I don't think it's come back, but
Yeah, it'll come back on in just a second. So anyway, yeah, so we're back and we're going to continue along. We're doing number 3 of the 8 limbs of yoga, and it's exciting because I love these. And I was just having a little chat on the break with my dear friend Lior, and we were saying how interesting, like yoga is true mysticism. And mysticism, it's like this kind of esoteric knowledge, right? So it has, the roots are in like kind of the understanding that there's a world beyond the physical, and that's the predominant energy of all of us, all of our existence and everything. So we can tap into that realm. That's where we're, going to draw our greatest strength, our greatest power, and live our best life. And so yoga teaches that. And through this 8-limb path, it's kind of like the 10 commandments in a way. If you think about it, it's like what to do, what not to do. That was what 10 commandments were modeled after the 8 limbs of yoga, I believe, because the 10 commandments came much later. So that's the way I kind of see it as well, in a way. What do you think about that?
I think you could have 20 commandments. I mean, the first 10 from Moses are good. The yoga 10 commandments are good. They're all kind of saying the same thing, which is, remember your own true nature, and you remember the natures of others, and then you won't be harming them.
It's so important.
So next up, we have Satya. Satya translates to truthfulness. And this is a big one. So when we start to think about, Satya, the first thing that comes to mind was, other people who have lied to us. Oh, that person told me a lie. But, we need to look at lying in a lot of different ways. So we can lie to ourselves. We can lie to others. We can observe other people lying to other people. And then we can have other people lie to us. Yeah. And so you see, like, this is lying. And then we have truthfulness. And so truthfulness is an interesting thing. Now, when we go to give truth, we need to give the truth while considering the Yama above this, which is ahimsa, or non-harming. Because these are actually, non-harming is the first principle, and satya, truthfulness, is second. So for instance, if you run into your friend and she's just gained 200 pounds and she's wearing a giant red dress and looks like some creature that you've never seen before. Okay, so you could be truthful and be like, oh my God, you put on 200 pounds, why do you look like, and be like this. Or you can pause for a moment and see a deeper truth and see that, and look to the truth of what's happening with her, right? So there's many ways. There's you seeing truth and there's you speaking truth. So do you know what the truth that would help her would be? Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. Why? Because you realize the truth of she knows how she looks. Yeah. So it's an interesting thing with truth is that the higher part of truth is not saying what first comes to your mind, but that it's kind of sprouted in the garden of wisdom. Like you're like, okay. And a general rule for truthfulness is don't say things to people that they can't experience. And that's an interesting way to kind of say it, but you know, and this will work with your students, because when you start teaching and there's something that you really like that you see and you really want to tell them, but you need to assess how will they receive it. Yeah, and if they're not willing to, there's a lot of things I can tell you that are true that will damage you. So we have to consider truth as to harm. Yeah, not harming. Like, is this something this person can experience? Meaning it'll be helpful and they'll use it as a tool to grow. Or if I tell them this, does it collapse their space and put them into a much better, like much worse path? Does that make sense?
And also, I think about truthfulness to ourselves. You know, it made me think of something. I had a client one time, and it goes with her story a little bit, because it's also part of this body dysmorphia we've been talking about, where you don't see yourself as you are. You have your own version of what you are and who you are. Yep. And he had a huge belly, like he was not in shape, you know, and he had this hypnosis clinic where he would help people lose weight and, like, you know what I mean? And he was not the embodiment of that practice. But anyway, he didn't realize it, and he never saw himself. He saw himself as like this hot guy. And one day he went to the beach, and he was sitting in his car, and a man walked by in a Speedo with a huge belly hanging over. And it was his first time. He was like, that's me. And he had this huge, like, life-shattering revelation that he had not been seeing himself as he was. And therefore, a lot of other things started to make sense about why he wasn't getting along with his wife, like little things, like he was seeing himself as this strapping, sexy guy, and he wasn't anywhere near what he was seeing. And so, like, this lying to yourself, right, is also part of the satya, or the truthfulness, because it's how do you interact with self, how do you interact with others, and then how do you interact with the world at large. Like, one of the things that comes to my mind is also politicians. A lot of politicians are kind of known for, like, putting on a front. They call it the mask, right?
No way.
Like, they say one thing and they do the other thing. Right? Okay, we know that's happening all over. Like, but politicians are kind of the most notorious for this. But all beings, kind of, a lot of people do this, especially in social media. A lot of people, they have like this persona, and that's who they are in the world. And then who they are, like, in their life is not the same. And this is also in the same category of kind of non-truthfulness. It's like being inauthentic and being not yourself in that way. And so the way I perceive and the importance of this is that you always want to be yourself, you know, and you always want to be truthful.
Which self should I be? I've got so many.
You want to be truthful of who you are. And if you don't know who you are, then you can be honest about that too. But, like, just being sincere and honest and truthful with self, and then obviously with others, and with your interactions with others, and also definitely with your interactions with your work. And that's another whole category where you have a lot of dishonesty and non-truthfulness. For example, where, here's a good example, Whole Foods is a huge brand that I think a lot of people think is organic. But when you go there, most of the stuff is not organic. So you have this kind of like greenwashing, right? And that's a big non-truthfulness that's going on in the world today, where you think something's good for the environment because they say all natural, but really it's just a bunch of chemicals.
So you can put it on your skin.
So this is, anyway, so this is all kind of related to the truthfulness topic and the satya.
Yeah. So basically, lies don't serve you. It's best to be quiet, because here's the other thing that happens with lying. And this is how you really mess up your mind. And I'll just tell a story here. I want you to imagine there's two friends. There's Maggie and Susan. And Susan goes over to Maggie's house, and she loves this blouse that Maggie has. And she just decides to take it and wear it. She won't mind. She has all kinds of justifications. Yeah. So Maggie takes the red blouse home, and she's really excited. And so the next day she puts it on, she goes out, and she goes to the coffee shop, and she runs into Jasmine. And Jasmine's like, oh, I love that blouse. You know, Susan has a blouse just like it. Where did you get it? I really like it. Now she has to lie. Okay, so now we see how these work together. So now she has to lie. So she goes and she tells Jasmine that she got it at Bloomingdale down the street. Jasmine's like, that's interesting. I think Maggie got it at Chanel. I didn't know Bloomingdale sold Chanel tops. Well, now Maggie's like, oh, I think it was just on, I don't know, it just swerves off. Yeah. So now Maggie has a real problem because Jasmine and Susan are really close. And Jasmine's going to ask Susan if the same blouse can be gotten at Bloomingdale's. So now Maggie has to remember her lie, and the next lie she's going to have to tell, and she has to avoid both people. And you see all the energy that's burned up in this shit? That's why. Yeah, and so we just want to see how this all kind of comes together and who's harmed in the end. This is the ahimsa part, the harming part. You harm yourself. Yeah, and now you got to keep track of all these lies, which uses up all your random access memory. Yeah, who did you tell what to when and all of this, and now you can no longer have higher thoughts. And so when it comes to satya is the yama. Yeah, we wanna not lie. The counterpart of that is svadhyaya, or self-study, which I touched on earlier. So how do we learn to be more truthful? We study the self. Yes, that's what we do. We read sacred texts, we look deeper, because it's not just truth in like the situation I gave you. There's also higher truth. What's the truth of life? These are things that exist outside the physical universe. This concept of truth as the true nature of something. To contemplate that is also a different thing. This is where we have self-study, svadhyaya. And svadhyaya is what you want to do a certain amount of hours every week or every day. You open a book, you read something, but you don't read it to get it done. Svadhyaya is not really to finish. You may finish quickly because you're like eating it so much, but you need to digest to make it self-study. You read something and you say, oh, okay, maybe and you go and you write and you look at your life and you look back and you look at who you want to be, how you want to show up, what's the truth of your life. And you use self-study as the thing you should do. Does that make sense? You see how yamas and miyamas actually are together? They're normally taught as one list and a separate one, but they actually support each other.
That's such a good point about, because kind of the miracle morning is a process of that. It's
Svadhyaya, baby.
Read, you meditate, you journal, you vision, and it's like this, it's a little program kind of almost like to do this svadhyaya. But I really feel also, one of the things that comes to mind is like when you have something happen, right? Whatever it is, let's say you had this example with the shirt or whatever it was, and then
That's a fun one.
yeah, it's fun because it's like these things happen when you're in high school or something. You know, I remember having my sister stealing my shirts, but like, you know, when you grow up, hopefully you
steal your dress.
when you grow up, you hope to grow out of these behaviors, right? But like some people never do, and the reason is because they don't actually ever learn that that's not right, or you know, it may cause suffering and
They don't
pain,
look
but-
at it.
They don't look at it. So that's the self-study. It's like when you've had something, let's say when you were in the high school and you had this thing, and then all of a sudden you learned the lesson because you had to look at it. They were mad. You lost the friend or whatever. And then you looked at yourself and you said, I'm never going to do that again. And that's that self-corrective behavior that helps us to grow. And that's called evolution. But if you never do the self-study, you never look at your behavior, you never change, then you stay stagnant or you like start declining and whatever. So there's like growth and evolution that's requiring self-study. And that's what this one is all about.
Yeah, it's a beautiful system because it really folds together. So our last one is ahimsa, which I talked about a little bit, and this means non-harming. Okay, so non-harming, this is a very interesting thing. This is where we have to do the calculation of what's the right choice for the most amount of beings, because you don't get a perfect situation. You never do. And so there's a story that I like to tell about a yogi that uses satya and ahimsa. So satya is truth and ahimsa is non-harming. So the yogi meditating on a mountain underneath a tree. And he's just sitting there, he's way up in the Himalayas. He's just, you know, doing his yogi thing, big long beard, you know, probably topless, you know, see it. Yeah, probably got some ash somewhere. He's a super spiritual guy. And as he's sitting there, this really freaked out man, yeah, comes running by looking like he's totally in a panic, like totally panicked, totally scared, totally terrified. And he runs up and he says to the yogi, is there anywhere I can hide? And the yogi, he opens his eyes and nods and says, there's a cave right over there. Goes back to his meditation. About 10 minutes later, yogi's back in samadhi. The existence doesn't exist for him. and a gang of 10 men with swords and dressed like, imagine like fancy dress samurais kind of, come running up, and they got like the swords with the big curves at the end. Yeah, not like a Western sword, like that kind of sword. Did you see it? Okay, we just gotta have the right sword. In my
You gotta
analogy,
see the sword, you
gotta
understand?
You gotta see the sword. So they come running up and they look really pissed off. And they go to the yogi and they say, has anyone come by here? Is there anyone, have you seen anybody? And now the yogi, he has a choice, Satya or Ahimsa, because it's pretty obvious that those guys are probably not going to give the guy a marshmallow. Right?
No.
So the yogi, he says, I haven't seen anybody. And the men with the swords, they talk to each other and they take off running in one direction. Do you know what the yogi does after that? He gets up and he leaves. This is ahimsa, because he doesn't put himself in a situation to be harmed either. He also values himself. Yeah. And he also, he doesn't know, he's not the judge. He's not getting involved with this drama. Yeah. But he knows that those 10 guys with swords, we don't know why they're chasing us. Yeah. Now he could say, oh, a guy went this way, but now he becomes the judge. And think about it. Think about that. And he doesn't know. Maybe these are bad dudes and they're trying to rob that guy. He doesn't know.
He just stays out of it.
Yeah, he realizes that, okay, I'm gonna harm him, and I don't want to be involved.
Yeah. And this is the other thing. Like, so ahimsa has so many layers, right? So we talk about having boundaries. Like, letting people take advantage of you is actually allowing, suffering to yourself or whatever, violence to yourself. And then also doing that to others, right? That's also, violence to others. And then there's also the animals, for example. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of yogis become vegans. Not all of them are, but this is one of the reasons for it, is that when you're, let's say, slaughtering an animal to feed yourself, there's like suffering involved in a lot of that slaughtering. And so then that you're taking on the suffering of the animal. So that's one of the reasons for the veganism in a lot of the yogic cult community. It's not always it's not required at all. But anyway, I feel like for myself anyway, what happened was I just felt after a while, I just felt that I didn't want to have it anymore. It wasn't that, oh, I'm doing this for some kind of protest against suffering, but your body naturally doesn't actually want to have that in you anymore. And so that's like a natural progression that can happen. But then I've also seen the flip side of it, where there are very violent, angry vegans who are like, you're killing the animals. And they're like so angry and violent about that stance that it's worse than just eating the animal.
Don't become the monster you fight.
Yeah. So this is also both sides. So I feel, and it's the same, what I've seen over the course of my life is most of the time protesting in a violent, angry way is counterproductive, because you don't, through the martial arts that I also studied, that you don't actually win through force, right? You always win through intelligence. And so that's a different approach. So the force of like trying to fight for it, it just meets with more resistance. So in terms of ahimsa, we want to look at how we have towards ourselves, towards others, towards the planet as well. And this is a huge one. The humanity needs to be taught ahimsa, specifically when it comes to how we're treating the earth. It has been destroyed, raped, it's been polluted, like all the ocean is full of like particles of plastic. And this is something that will take thousands, perhaps millions of years to completely, for the ocean to cleanse itself, but it will eventually. And that's what they always say, like, we're not destroying the earth will survive beyond us. We're destroying our home, so we might not be able to make it after a certain point, but the planet will live on. So that's a beautiful thing. The planet's much bigger and stronger than all of us. But either way, when you live in an environment, you want to have love towards it, and not like, it's a form of violence to just strip it of its minerals and all of its resources and then leave it barren and like destroy the ecosystems and everything, and also the animals and all of that. So we're in a time on Earth where I really feel that ahimsa should be taught in the schools, and it's not really being taught to anyone. And even if they were being taught, it's not being taught in a way that's helping people to really want to make a change in a big enough way yet. You see people even knowing that plastic is a problem, and yet it's still the most prominent thing that's available in all the stores, right? So like the bridge between what you should do that's best for the planet, best for yourself, and then what's even possible to do in certain instances is still a pretty wide gap. So I think the more that people are awake, and actually, I always say, like, you vote with your dollars, you vote with your thoughts, you vote with your actions, you vote with your decisions. And when I say vote, it means that's what's changing the scenario. So if we all boycotted plastic, we would see something replacing that pretty rapidly. But because it's being purchased, then it's the most prominent thing available on the shelf. So it's like every single moment we have the choice to be conscious, and our decisions are always kind of coming from this. Is it harming or is it helping? Right? Is the other one helping? What's the oh, the other one.
So the opposite of this one is Ishvara Pranidhana. So the Niyama is, and Ishvara means the great controller. It's another way of describing God. And Pranidhana means to surrender to it moving through you. So the another translation of this is the creator moves through the creations of others. Okay, so what are you creating? Because it's whatever is going to move through you. So how do you weave in this world? And with this idea of something bigger moving through you, then when something bigger is moving through you and you look at other beings, you don't recognize them as also yourself, because the creator created all of it. So how do you harm them? Right? Because if you really understand Ishvara Pranidhana, it means the creator moves through the creation of others. Now, if the creator is moving through me into my creation, also the creator is moving through you into your creation. Creator is not a separate thing. Maybe you create differently, I create differently, creator is the same. So in this, we are the same. Ishvara Pranidhana. Then how do I harm you? I see you as myself.
Well, some people harm themselves too. But I have. But here's the other part of it, because this is, I think, the great enigma of our time and throughout history, is they would say, like, okay, if the creator is moving through you and it's coming through and it's being a beautiful contribution, the creator is moving through her and it's creating a contribution that's equally beautiful from the same source, which is God, then how come some people, their contribution is damaging to the planet? And, like, where is that coming from? Is there a devil? Is there something that is opposite of goodness, that is the source of life? What's your stance on this?
I can explain it.
Okay, we got Ray explaining if there's a devil. We got
Satan be God.
Some people actually have the word. It's spelled, they're using the word Satan these days. Cult, satanic cult. This is like very spoken about. Where is the source of all of this happening right now on the planet? And I don't really, I'll give you my stance, but I want to hear yours first.
There are different levels and densities to the way the reality is made. And within a certain spectrum, you have a force of decay and a force of life. You have a ha, that resisting force. What is it resisting? It's resisting death. Ta is surrendering to any forces that act upon it. Now, the physical universe is composed of various aspects of ha and ta. Now, this aggregates into a plethora of many, many different illusions, a myriad of illusions that they call Maya, right? So that exists only in a specific spectrum. In a more hierarchical or a lighter place, it does not exist. There is no decay force. There is no movement either. There's only a static. There's no change. There's a static. Where there's change, is no longer a static. It becomes plus and minus. It becomes up and down. It becomes dark and light. And all the variances in between by virtue of two, by virtue of the separation of two. This physical universe is all made in pairs of twos. If you look at chemistry, if you look at physics, you'll see this duality, but you'll also see, if you look at higher physics, that something else directs that. There's some kind of unified, and I don't want to use the word field because it's another thing, which affects the thing, okay? So in between this density where you have the manifest lightness and darkness, you have the polar reality. In between that, as it begins to touch the spiritual universe, you have less and less of devils and darkness in this. As it becomes more dense, it takes forms, and those forms enjoy chaos and destruction and decay. So the devil only exists in certain bands of reality. And of course, within that, we have degraded spirits or entities. We have ghosts, we have ghouls, we have other kinds of entities that travel in the biological line. We have demonic spirits, yeah, that can take possession, and a whole plethora of other things which I don't really need you to know about yet. But those are real things. But they're not everywhere. They're not in all aspects of something. And you probably have been in the presence of someone in possession that was possessed by a force other than themselves. And you can see when that comes over their eyes, and you can see that immediately around them chaos begins. And it comes and reaches those worlds. And that is a real thing. And a yogi has no problem with that. That's what I think about it.
I agree. You know, it's interesting because I think of COVID and what's been happening on the planet, that this conversation is really important, specifically to come from. My perspective is exactly the same. I use different words.
Pinky swear home slices.
Yeah, I use different words. So but the idea is
she is the fluffy one.
in the oneness of existence, all, but so basically though, it's the same. And so there was this one guy, I remember I met him, and he was like, he decided he was creating a new theory of existence because he believed that there was a masculine and a feminine energy that created everything. So he believed that duality was the origin of it all. And I was like, we don't align. So in my view is that there is this one existence that created, that's called source. So the one existence is the source of life. And then from there, the next level in is creator. And then from there, whatever is created manifests into this duality experience that we have. That's why we have bodies. That's why you have a separate soul than me, apparently. But if we keep zooming out, that's what I talked about the other day, keep zooming out in the widest lens possible, it's all one energy, right? And then when you zoom in, you're one separate from her. And all of a sudden, the more microscopic we get, it starts to look more and more like a duality. But that's the human experience, is how do you live in the duality, in these separate bodies, and experience both without getting stuck in the duality, because that's the chaos, that's the conflict, that's also many times the suffering. But to be able to experience the oneness is to know that all of us are one energy coming from the same source of life. And so we have a responsibility to treat each other with love and kindness, because that is the essence of what we are. And so the more we remember that, then we have harmony and peace and love in the world. The more we forget that, then we have the ego, the greed, the delusion, the Maya, the illusions, and all of that, which is what some people on earth are here leading the way of that ballgame, which is how do we rape the earth, take from the people, make trillions of dollars, make everybody sick and dying. That's a whole energy that's existing on that earth at this time. And it's not necessarily evil. It just happens to operate in a unconscious
Not necessarily
energy.
not. We can
Well,
call
yeah,
we
you
can
can
call
call
it
it whatever,
evil,
you
we
can
can
label
call
it. But that labeling is in the duality.
dark force,
You can come up with
decay, yeah.
whatever word. But the idea that from the bigger perspective, it's not like evil or not evil. It's just existing in an unconscious, in an unconsciousness. So the unconsciousness has an illusion that it is separate and that it needs to take in order to prosper. And the consciousness is that you give and we all prosper. So that's moving from the me to the we, the energy that I am you. And like I said, me and Leora was talking about the other day, there was a famous quote by Sri Nisarga De Maharaj, and he said, there are no others. And the idea that whatever you're looking at in front of you is you. And when you understand that, then you could never harm another being. You could never cause a plague on the planet, lock everyone up. That would never happen if you're conscious, right? So those energies that are creating this experience on the planet is coming from an unconscious place. So we can label it as evil, we can label it as bad, because that's what we do in this world. We try to label things. But if you just see it from a bigger picture, it's just unconscious and it hasn't evolved yet.
We should just eat it.
That's what she'll be eating that. I'll be having chocolate.
I will be having some of that Satan chocolate. Thank you very much.
Dipped in barbecue sauce.
Yeah. So what we've gone through now, we've just touched on what's known as the Yamas and Miyama. This is the first 2 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga. The rest of them are also equally as broad, but they don't have a specific list. So this is something that was just an introduction, but as you can see, there's a lot there. There's a lot in this. And so the Yamas and Miyamas are traditionally given first in the Raja Yoga path. You guys didn't come first from Yamas and Miyamas. You came from Asana, which is the third limb of 8 limbs, Raja Yoga. And Asana has one definition. The body should be sukha and sthira. It's asana, sukha, sthira. The form should be, and sukha means full of ease. And sthira means stable or steady. It's a steadiness. It's like and what it's talking about here is the balancing of the ha and tha. The body should be the belly should be strong enough. The posture should be upright. But then it's not upright like this, right? The right amount of activity and the right amount of relaxation. In downward dog, we're not scrunching our shoulders up by our ears. Now we have the right amount of activity and the right amount of ease. So body should be sukha and sthira. To accomplish that, many styles and forms of physical postures have been created and lost in the time of yogis. And the first asanas were spontaneous physical kriyas. In other words, they came out of a higher state as a form that just felt like the energy. But then as people became more and more detached from their own true nature, they couldn't have spontaneous kriyas in the breath and the mind and the body anymore. So then forms were created and taught more in a religious form, memorize the sequence, because reality, you can do the thing, the forms that come from the kriyas, but you can practice the forms to find the kriyas. So we can work in both ways. And anyways, for Westerners, we must give physical things first because they believe that they are a body. No matter how many times you tell someone who grew up in a traditional Western society, the way the consciousness creates forms, they somehow have a subtle consideration of the body developed a brain, and the brain developed a mind, and the mind became conscious or unconscious or some amount of it. And the view of yoga is very different. It's from the universe down to the level we call the intelligence or maha, down through a system of like how things are created. And then you, as an individuated being with the potential to realize your own true nature, got a mind and a body and all of these things. And now when you have the viewpoint that you are the highest thing trickling down a little bit, like if you can imagine like a stalactite in a cave, you're coming down from that beautiful into an aggregate thing. If you have that understanding, then everybody is another view and everything is possible. But if you have the idea that somehow you were lucky enough to eat enough, animals and get enough brain power and get a consciousness and now all of a sudden now we have a spiritual interest, it's a very hard thing. And so if they have that viewpoint, asana is the place to meet them. Because through asana, you begin to give an experience of something bigger than self. The moment someone gets a real experience of something beyond them, begins to legitimately and consciously connect, the world changes. Does this make sense? Yeah?
Yeah. And the interesting thing too, because I've always been an athlete actually, so I was always into movement, even before I was
I've always been an athlete.
Yeah, you like to lay on the mat. Well, anyway, I was always into it. Like I was in all the sports. I was a cheerleader too. But anyways, I liked movement and it always healed me. Like I had a lot of trauma, but anytime I found myself in the movement category, I felt better. So I was like, okay, this is good. Like I want to keep moving in the direction of what makes you feel good. So it was interesting when I got into the asana because it was so easy for me. It actually, but I did have scoliosis and it was very healing on that level. But I wanted to mention because I met a number of older yogis when I was an early teacher who were like not into the asanas anymore. And they're like, they thought they had transcended that lower level of the world and of the yoga path.
Has a body, gots to move it.
Yeah. And I went, and so but they had all this, so they were like, they had all this back pain. They were in a lot of pain, but they were kind of thought that they had become too enlightened to do the yoga asanas still. And I was like,
Has a body, gots to move it.
and the thing is, what I talked to them, and I was like 25 or whatever, but I was like teaching at this conference, and I was like, well, I mean, at the time I was just thinking like, no matter what, even if I'm 100, I'm still gonna move my body, right? So like, I didn't have that thought. But now as I see, like it happens a lot in the yogic world, like as you get like down the path of yoga, you start thinking like, okay, the asana is like the lower level of it. And you might hear people say like, oh, that's just the entry level. But I think that in the bigger picture, like it's important to really realize there is no hierarchy here. So it's not that the asana is the lower level. It's literally, you need that too. And you need to also pursue the spiritual development. And it's all happening simultaneously. It just so happens that we are physical beings. And so when we embark upon an asana journey, like that's usually the most appealing at first, because the other realms are not available to everyone from the beginning. Some people are spiritual from their birth. So that's a little different. Who here felt like you were spiritual before you found yoga? Raise your hand, right? So a lot of people. So if you were already feeling spiritual, then that's a little bit different. Some people come in, they didn't feel any connection to spirituality, and then so they felt really connected to the sport of yoga, right? The physical. And then it was a gateway into the possibility of learning more about the spiritual dimension. But if you came in already spiritual or aware of spiritual dimension, then your experience of asana or your experience of the spiritual practice is kind of one and the same. You're like, it's all a vessel to this beautiful experience of just awakening and to expansion and evolution. But for some people, and you'll find this, like I said, as you embark upon a teaching journey, that some people see it as a hierarchy and that the physical is less than the spiritual. And I just like to invite everybody to know that like all of it's the same. It's all spiritual. And at the same time, some people get stuck in the asana. And then you see those people, we call them asana junkies. And these are people, right? And they're literally that's all they do.
Yeah.
That's all they do. They want to have the perfect poses and the perfect leggings, and that's their Instagram lifestyle. And it's a level of addiction, but it's also a level of being stuck. Because if you're not really opening to these other levels that we're going to about to talk about, it becomes limiting to your development. So you never want to have any aspect of the practice limiting you. And at the same time, you don't want to judge if somebody's stuck there, right? Because everybody awakens at their own pace, right? So everybody awakens in their own time. So that's the unique thing about being a teacher, is that people will come to you, they might want to just do asana for the first 20 years, and that's okay. Right. And though some people will want to start right away learning about the spiritual dimension, and that's beautiful too. I always teach both, but if I find
I'm sorry, I always teach both too.
Yeah, I always teach both.
You're not
but I'm
gonna
saying
work
some
with
people
me
don't.
physically if you're like you just won't if you're not, because how can I teach you to move like an angel if you've forgotten what you are? I have to remind you of what you are before I can teach you to correctly move.
Exactly. But you'll
Otherwise,
find a
your
lot of
consciousness
classes, I'm
leaks out.
sure, that don't teach any spiritual stuff, and they're still calling it yoga. That's all I'm saying, is that there's like a plethora of yoga being, taught in the world. And through our teaching, I always teach both. So, okay.
All right, excellent. So the yamas and niyamas are particularly necessary for you to know. So we spend some more time on those. I want to go over the next few limbs so you get the whole framework. So next up we have pranayama, and prana means energy, oftentimes referring to breath, suspension, retention, or control. It ties into Brahmacharya, or the ability to control and direct energy. So things that fall under pranayama are obviously your breath work, but also kundalini, force redirection, the entire Vayu system, which is not well known. And the interesting thing about pranayama is for you to control energy, you must control your mind field. And a good way to have an idea of these is you can think about the body, and this is just an analogy, so don't become too attached to it. But you can think about the body like you have a block of ice. You can set that block of ice and it stays. You can think about the energy like a bowl of water. It's a little more difficult to control. You need a container. And you can think about the mind like steam. Requires a bit. Steam moves fast, it disperses fast. And so it requires a different container. Now for you to learn to direct energy, whether it's with the pranayama or different flows or geometric forms or changing fields or rasa or psychic emotional energy or Vayu system, you must have control over your attention. And you must train that like a muscle, and you must remove the cliche things. So you must clear the coloring so that you can put your attention. And it's not pulled constantly by your past. Okay? So pranayama is a body of work that studies how to affect energetic flow. And there's different densities within this. Anything to add on pranayama?
Yeah, I want to mention in that a lot of people, when they hear pranayama, they just think that it's breathing exercises. So that's kind of like when you hear yoga and you think of the poses, right? So that's why I think is really effective way of describing that it's so much more than that. And so when you say we're going to do breath work, that's one kind of aspect of pranayama as a whole, right? And then it's a whole study in and of itself. And a lot of the things we've been learning in this teacher training is also, like she said, the kriyas as a part of this aspect, because you're just wanting to really train your, like she said, your attention, which is your mind, your focus, your energy goes, where your focus goes, energy flows. So that's how you manifest things in your life. You're focusing in that direction, and then all of a sudden you create that. And you focus in that direction, you create that. And that's why things like law of attraction, whatever, are real, because it's really where you're putting your attention is what you're bringing in.
I'm watching you falling asleep. It's iron deficiency.
You think so?
I can see it. Yeah.
I have mine.
Yeah, no, it's no problem. She doesn't know. It's iron deficiency. Yeah, I come see me after. I'll give you some stuff. That's what's going on. Yeah. No, you can't wake up. Yeah, you don't have enough oxygen in your bloodstream. That's all. Yeah. Yep. Of course, no problem. Okay, so pranayama is a whole thing that you study like asana. Like right now, you guys are in an asana training, so it's asana heavy. You need to know about forms, flows, how to teach. It's asana. Some pranayama, yeah, they work together, but a pranayama training is a separate thing. Okay, now your next is number 6 is dharana. Dharana I talked about a little bit yesterday. This means concentration.
So pratyahara.
Oh, I
Did you
just
do that?
skipped
Oh,
around.
sorry.
Did not.
I was because I put that one on the board.
Sorry.
and then I
Yeah,
thought,
pratyahara. Sorry. I withdrawed that one.
oh. Withdrawing the senses of that one.
Yeah. So pratyahara is control of the senses, specifically with the ability to receive attention so that you can put it back. So receive, withdraw attention. So think about, oh my gosh, puppy, you're so cute. So think about you're sitting to meditate and the fly lands on your arm and the sound of something distracts you. And so all the senses are constantly being stimulated. And they control us instead of us controlling them. So a yogi, just like withdrawing a hand from a glove, is to systematically remove attention from the sense channels, but then also to put it back. So I can be completely aware but unaffected. It's a very different thing. So the science of learning how to work with senses is pratyahara practice. And this is an uncommon thing. I happen to love them, but they give you strange abilities.
They call them cities. You know, there's a story about this guy, and there was like a lot of these stories, but anyway, this was interesting because there was one of these advanced yoga masters that was capable of doing this at a very high level, and they wanted to study him at a research hospital. So they brought him to the school. It was like I don't know, University of Chicago or something, and they hooked him up to all the electrodes because they had heard that he had the ability to completely withdraw all of his senses and stop his heartbeat for 5 minutes, and then he could come back. And so they're like, we want to see if you can do it. We're going to hook you up to the electrodes so we can actually have research of this. So he sat down and he got into his meditative state, and literally like it was like, and then all of a sudden flatline for 5 minutes. And then he brought himself back. He opened his eyes. It was normal again. And he's like, okay. And he had to go upstairs and he was giving a lecture. And it was just so remarkable for people. I think so. And I think that this is like such an important thing to know that this exists, because so many people, they have this perception of what is possible, right? And they start saying, oh, well, that's impossible. But once it's been done and then researched and studied and they have documentation, like, okay, so nothing's impossible. They got little kids in China bending spoons with their mind. You know, you have people levitating. This is all called siddhis. And in the yogic, ancient yogic kind of path, this was not necessarily the intention, but this was like one of the kind of bonuses that you get from the practice, that you can develop these otherworldly mastery of the realms where you no longer adhere to the kind of like the physics of it all. And then you can kind of do things that nobody else can do. And what's the purpose of it? Well, if you can get to that level of mastery, then what else could you do? Right?
The purpose of it is you need to leave all siddhis. The siddhis are a trap. Yeah, because the moment you get these abilities, oh, you want to use them. The moment you start to use them for your own benefit, you lose them. And so you go back down. So all siddhis are only used in the betterment of good. So I can do one thing with students when it's for them. But if it's for my own benefit, we don't. And own benefit always has to consider others. So siddhis are a trap if you don't understand there's what's called lower siddhis and higher siddhis. The lower siddhis are, you know, things that we think of like cool, like telepathy, levitation, all of this stuff, which are actually quite easy to attain. You just have to deal with some stuff. The higher siddhis are love, unremittent, undifferentiated, compassion, actual compassion. And all real siddhis, if they sustain for any amount of time, must come out of those. Does that make sense? So siddhis are talked about a lot in the 4th chapter of the Yoga Sutras. Very interesting. Communication with celestial beings, all kinds of stuff, you know, remote viewing ability. There's all kinds of like lovely abilities, and they happen very naturally as a side effect of relieving yourself of the things which you are not. You become what you are, which is quite profound. But to do that, you have to leave the things you are not. And that's the problem. You have a very heavy grasping to all of the past, all of the failures, all of the things you've been convinced you are. And so my job is to remind you of your own true nature. And then your siddhis, they're actually, they call them superpowers, but that's a mistranslation. They're actually your natural abilities.
And they even say that eventually, I mean, I believe this, and we were talking about this the other day, that humans are going to be communicating predominantly through telepathy. We already have these abilities. We've just kind of, like she said, lost them because we are on our phone all the time. So we have now come to program our belief system to believe that we need the phone to communicate, or we need words to communicate, when so often we can communicate with a tree. Like, we don't actually need words, right? So you can start to practice even just by communing with a tree. And that's one of the best ways to develop these sensory powers if you want to. And yeah, don't use them for selfish reasons or whatever. But
they won't last long. That's the thing, is that if you use them in that way, you lose that ability. So siddhis are beautiful. They're a side effect of pratyahara practice. Just
okay, we had a couple questions.
No, they never really got
This
around.
one said, I had a question piggybacking.
Yeah, but they haven't said
Oh,
it
she
yet.
didn't
I keep
finish the
asking,
question.
Yeah,
She's not getting to the question.
Yeah,
Okay. Keeps asking.
Okay, anyone, so we can see the live stream on YouTube. We have this here. If you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, chop, moving right along. Next up, dharana. And dharana means concentration. This is the effort part of meditation. You draw the arrows of your attention towards a single point or multiple points with control. Notice if you put your attention on an object, how long can you hold it there before you have a secondary thought? Well, train it. This was one of my first obsessions as a little girl. I trained dharana practices, not for any good reason, mostly because I was convinced that if I could hold my mind in one place or in emptiness, that I would develop the ability to read my brother's cards when we were playing Go Fish. So I grew up in a yogi family, and that's like, as a yogi kid, you're like, wait a second. And I had that idea, so I practiced very hard, concentrating my thoughts in that way. And this is known as dharana.
Did you succeed?
Of course.
She crushed it.
You should see me play blackjack or poker. You don't want to.
Don't mess with me. Don't mess.
All right. So what we want to understand about dharana is all guided meditations. If there's a guiding, it's dharana. I'm taking your attention and putting it somewhere. Dhyan, which is these two work together, is meditation. So this means no longer is my attention concentrated on something, an object, where the object is in the mind field or the physical universe or a mantra or a posture or something or any object of any sort. Yeah. And instead, it's like that the light no longer goes out, it just radiates. Meditation. You can think about meditation. If I put my arms out like this, it's slightly moving. It's not a static. So, but it's a still passive state of awareness where you're in the I amness. Now, most of what people think about with meditation is they're actually doing dharana, concentration, which is the preparation. The next step is dhyan. I am, I be, I exist without an activity. If I need to make an activity, it comes out of the I amness. So dhyan, the dharan comes out of dhyan. Dhyana is oftentimes exemplified as Kali standing on the body of Shiva, Shiva being Dharan, Kali being Dhyan. In other words, the Tha state or the feminine state of this passive awareness, not unconscious, yeah, is much more powerful than dharana concentration. But dharana comes first. If I can't concentrate you, if your mind is always yeah, like a very excited chihuahua, probably we can't get to Dion. So first we have to concentrate, and that can take a while depending on the samskaras and the compulsions of the practitioner.
That's why people always say things like meditation is so hard. Meditation is not hard. Actually, it's the concentration and the monkey mind that you have to train. So training is hard to get to the point, but meditation itself is just relaxing and beingness. But you can't really get to that until you've at least transcended some of that constant fluctuations of the mind. So that's why they do have somewhat of an order to that.
Yeah.
But these ones that she's mentioning, which is dharana, dhyana, and then the final one, which is samadhi, those are the third final of the 8-limb path. And they're all forms of meditation that we, like how we label meditation.
Dharana, dhyana, and samadhi is upper triangle. They work together to create vairagya practice.
So the samadhi, which is the 8th one, is that total absorption with the divine.
Yeah, so what this means, the translation of the word sama is equal or balance. Now remember yesterday I got into this a bit because it's important that you understand nothing in the physical universe is balanced. Nothing. If you can find me one thing, you will blow my mind. Everything is balancing. Even a building that you think stands for 1,000 years is not a static. Yeah, it's still balancing. So when we get to sama, what it's saying is that at this moment, after dharana and dhyana, here, your attention goes into the spirit, which is a no thing, a nothingness that creates everything. It's an empty, static, unchanging field. It has its own laws. The spiritual universe has its own laws. It's different from the physical universe. Separate set of principles. Yeah, but none of them have to do with duality. And so at this moment, sama means all attention has gone towards center, deep absorption, and samadhi is usually correlated with different mahamudra states. And mahamudra means all the bandhas and mudras inside are lifting and how would you say, aggregating around Sushumna, the center channel. Okay. Now this might sound very far-fetched and fancy, and they'll tell you it will take forever and ever and ever, but I will tell you something more true. You pass through samadhi state throughout the day. You just don't notice it because it's so just not what you're looking for. It's so simple and so clear and so no thing. You don't notice it because when you move from the Ida and Pingala Nadi, from the left and the right channel throughout the day, you pass through it. It may be imperfectly passed through, but you touch upon it regularly. It is the most familiar state. That's why it's so difficult, because you expect unicorns and rainbows and ponies and Jesus and sunshine, and all of that is there. I promise you, not in the way you think of it. It's there in the absolute unified simplicity of no differentiation. Sama, equal, static, balanced, unchanging, unborn, undying, always awake, always aware. Sama, the state, always with you. Everything else is just louder than it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And one of the things about flow state, so that's why I like this concept of flow state, is that the flow state is kind of this mergence with that beingness. It's also a feminine energy, like in a sense, if you were going to put an energy label, I guess, because the beingness is the state and the doing is the absence of it. Yeah, that's the getting there. But then like the beingness, that's the samadhi. It's just the absolute non-doing, and then the absorption into that state. So when we talk about flow state, it's like kind of like in between. It's somewhere like between meditation and samadhi. Samadhi is like absolute.
You're like flow state. So flow state is what she's talking about. So samadhi, probably gonna, there's 7 different levels of samadhi. Probably when you experience the first few, you're gonna not be doing much. But then when they become more familiar, and you begin to work in the world, you effortlessly concentrate, you effortlessly have your beingness, and you effortlessly remember your own true nature. And when she says flow state, she means all of those things working together. Yeah, so it's a really excellent concept, it's a really excellent viewpoint. Yeah, so when these work together, when your ability to concentrate is perfectly balanced with your ability to hold multiplicities and not be disturbed, and your ability to know that any of this movement, any of this concentration are not you. You are a static of nothingness. And when you hold all three at the same time, that's what she means by flow state.
You guys have probably, that's why she was saying you passed through it. You felt that before. Who here felt like you've been in this flow state before? You're like, everything's just one beautiful energy of existence, right? So the intention of all of these practices, you say like you learn like thousands of practices, but the intention of any of it is to get to that, right? And if you could just be in that, then you don't need any practices, you're good. But
If you can't, then we got some shit.
Yeah, then we got lots of things.
As soon as you get there, listen, the goal is to get to the roof. Maybe you can just levitate directly there. If you can't, I got a ladder, I got a rope swing, I got a, I got a trampoline, I got a rocket, I got some stairs. It doesn't matter. But when you get to the roof, you don't drag the ladder up with you. You're there, and that's it.
That's right.
Making sense? Any questions about this?
We have a little bit more time.
A little bit more time, but let's see. No, they never wrote the
People
question.
don't actually get the questions going. So let's see if we have any over here. And you guys in this.
Christiana does.
Yeah, let's get a question over here. Can we get a copy of the recording? Yes, we have a link that we can.
Christiana, you already know me. She works with me a lot. Of course, you already found it. It's if you Google Swami J and the phrase 8 limbs, it'll query that page on the website.
Yeah, but we have the replay if you guys want to see. I'll send the link. It's on my YouTube.
My tricks.
It's on my YouTube. You can get it from YouTube. And then let's see. Who else is asking questions? Some of the people saying about Sankalpa Shakti. That was a while back. Anyway, okay, so in this room, who here has any question about this? Was any of this helpful to you? Did it make things more clear?
Yes, very.
I had beautiful.
Don't be shy. We like your questions.
These are the best questions. No, tell us.
When you were talking about the part to sort of, when you don't like doing something and then do that thing.
Yeah.
I was thinking of like a way to practice it. Would you literally just find a load of things that you don't like doing and do it? Because I've got really, if I don't like doing something, I will do everything in my power not to do it.
Yeah, this is one of my biggest reasons for success in this life is I study that which is hard for me. So when I decided to go to college, I'm an excellent speaker, I'm a brilliant artist, I'm a great musician. So I took organic chemistry.
Yeah, that's
Why?
very brave.
No, it's not brave, it's that I have the belief that I can become skilled at anything if I put my attention there.
Yeah.
And you know, this is why I do my accounting. You know why? I hate it. So I make myself do it. And now it's no longer a problem. Yeah. And this way, because as a yogi, why should you have something that's hard for you? If anyone can do it, you can. You must overcome yourself. And that's the practice, and that's the overcoming the shenanigans of the mind. That's the tapas, that's the potential of you. And the more you do that, I eat the things I resist. Okay, doesn't like doing it.
So if you come against something, you're like, oh, I hate doing that.
No, go do it. I don't do it. I
Exactly.
eat it.
I'm guessing it must get easier.
It gets my, yeah, how does I see how I keep saying I eat it?
Yeah.
You see, like when there's something that's hard for me, it's really like this. I go and it's like I think about it like that with a passion, like I'm passionately eating something. Yeah, doesn't want to do this, so I go and I eat it.
It's the same thing as facing your fears, you know, because like what you resist persists, right? So like you're gonna keep seeing it in your face your whole life until you face it. And so whether it's a fear or it's just something you dislike, all of those, that's what I was saying about Buddha. All of those dislikes are literally just for you to look at so you can move through that energy of dislike that's a part of the consciousness that keeps permeating your experience. So like then you get to the point where it's like, okay, I neither dislike or like necessarily, it is just what it is, but I'm going to move in the direction of what brings joy. But at the same time, if something keeps coming back around, okay, you need to look at that.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's done consciously. So tapas is done not compulsively. It's like you spot the areas in your life that you're resisting doing something. And whenever you spot yourself resisting, you do it. And so if you hate folding your socks, you fold your socks in your friend's socks. So you get over the drama with socks. If you hate something, you make yourself confront it. Because then you become powerful. The other way, you become the effect of the universe. And understand that you have entered into a game here in this world. And the game is this. You are playing that you can take the physical universe, which has this counter force that you can create in it. That's your game, because you're bored. This is a hard world to create in. The game of the physical universe is to convince you, this all-powerful spirit, that you are an object. And so what is an object? An object is affected by anything. So this object, I move it. It doesn't have any willpower. Now, this isn't actually dead. We just think it's dead. You have the idea of acupuncture and gain communication with any object. They're just held together. They're degraded to such a point that they believe they're an object. Now, when I say to you guys, all spiritual practice is learning to expand spaces, control spaces, direct spaces. What's happening in most people is collapsing spaces. Whether it's compression in the body, compression in the mind, the spaces of their mind field collapse, the spaces of their ability collapse. So when we begin to like really look at this, you need to expand your spaces. So you should pursue the things that are hard for you. And the other thing, if you want to be excellent in life, is finish what you start. The ability, yeah. Because what happens when you do something halfway is it stays active in your mind field.
Yeah. It's like leaving one of the windows open in the computer.
Yep,
all
and
the
it sucks
time.
all
Yeah.
exactly like this, and it sucks all your attention.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So what do? You finish, not because what happens? You start a project, you're like so inspired, so great. You hit an obstacle, okay, fine. You hit another obstacle, oh, okay, and you hit another. It's not meant to be. I am cause, not effect. I am the creator, not the object. So what do? I say I find a way, anyways, as a meditation. I make myself finish things with meditation.
Mhm. But also, there's a balance to that, to also see when the universe is redirecting. So sometimes that, but it's
I
if you're trying
redirect
to
the
finish,
universe.
if you're trying to finish something and it's not happening for you, you do need to do that. But I'm saying like,
Whose universe? My universe.
And I think also for me, what's been working is to not consciously outwardly say something I don't like, so my boyfriend says it very well. He says, you don't have to hate chocolate ice cream because you love vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
Just like ice cream, you don't voice that,
I don't like that.
Yeah. Oh, you eat
Complaining
that,
is a
that's
disease.
Yeah.
Just
It
don't
is a
say it.
disease,
Just
yeah.
love your ice cream or
Yeah.
love your vanilla, but don't hate somebody else's.
Yeah.
So if you start with that, it consciously has you always say the positive of what you love and what you're going to bring in instead of what you hate all the time.
Exactly.
That's how it is, isn't it?
So
Yes. You get stuck in that.
that's so true. Well,
Yeah,
my
it's
beautiful
anything
queens,
negative.
you guys are good. Did anybody have any other questions about this topic today? So this was the 8-limb path,
That's
which
awesome.
is also known as Ashtanga path.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And it's been a beautiful
Both
This has
experience.
been great. Thank you so
my
much
love.
for lecturing.
Great conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is really fun. Everyone who tuned in. Christiana says this could be its own practice. Thank you so much, Christiana. I love you.
Yeah, we love you.
And thank you for joining us here in Costa Rica. Of course, this is the Raja Yoga. It's the 8-limb path. It's amazing. All
So
right,
beautiful.
my loves,
We're
my
going to
loves.
complete our practice. I'm just going to close the video. I do like to complete with this beautiful bowl. And if anybody wants to do either Palo Santo or Sage, I actually brought that as well. If you want to do it, Melody. We're just going to do a quick tuning in, take a nice deep breath. Oh my God. Whenever you receive a huge wealth of knowledge and wisdom, you need to take a moment to integrate that. Just take a deep breath into your heart, all the way to your belly, and just feel your vessel full of all of this beautiful, beautiful information, and allowing it to integrate into every cell, every molecule of your consciousness, so that it can become a part of you, so that you can come from a place of knowing and not just having learned, but now it's a part of your beingness. You can teach from that if you're in the teacher training, and you can live from that. And everyone should be living from this, is my view, as we start to really take it upon ourselves to lead the way of the conscious awakening of our planet and the humanity that we have as our human family at this time on Earth. As we see more consciousness being embodied, we start to see the Earth being restored back to her natural health and ecosystems, healing, the animals, the oceans, the waterways, the air, the climate coming back into a balanced state. We see humans coexisting in harmony, co-creating beautiful contributions that make the world a better place for each other. We start to see our children being taught how to meditate in the practice of yoga, ahimsa, and how to treat each other with loving kindness, compassion, and awareness. And we can truly stand for goodness in this world and let that be our contribution, which we have come and been born at this really remarkable time on earth as we are leading the awakening of humanity together. Thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you for your interest, your desire, your willingness to be a spark, a ray of light, a divine vessel for the source and God to stream through you, as you, so that every being whom you come into contact with is healed, is made whole, feels your divine presence, and knows that our essence is all the same, one source, one soul, one energy. Take a deep breath. Exhale. I'm going to complete our session today with 3 beautiful Oms. The first one is for yourself, filling yourself with that oneness. The second one, your family, your community. And the third, the whole world, our planet, and all of humanity. Inhale deeply. Inhale. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste, peace.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you, everyone.
Love you.
Thank you, everyone on the live stream. Thank you, ladies in the room, Jasmine, Dashima.
I love
Have
you.
blessed everything.
Everything blessed, all your families. Let's see. Someone asked if they're a live session on Wednesday. Yes, we're gonna do the